Lord of Mysteries, Survival from the Secret Doll Chapter 211 to 220. Countless secret puppets, mixed with numerous extraordinary creatures, fell from midair. The originally empty and silent hall instantly became an ocean of piled-up corpses. They were stacked together, and after losing their spirit threads, they rapidly underwent terrifying mutations. Countless extraordinary characteristics and various contaminations produced bizarre changes. If left unattended, it wouldn't be long before one after another humanoid, human-like, or simply monsters pieced together from countless limbs, with strange abilities and terrifying states, would be born here, following the law of conservation and the law of non-extinction of extraordinary characteristics. In the Evernight Theater, there was once a secret puppet, a demigod-level secret puppet pieced together from countless limbs and extraordinary characteristics, and the formation of that kind of secret puppet also originated from a similar situation. After Nicolas Flamel, the sequence one Angel of Thief, stole all the spirit threads of the secret puppets in the hall, he turned his attention to the swarming worms that had already extended their slippery, evil tentacles towards him. The countless swarming worms on the ancient, giant stone chair wriggled frantically, each worm carefully scrutinizing the intruder who had disturbed their slumber with deep, obscure gazes. Giant, slippery tentacles pierced through the black air currents that condensed and lingered above the hall, extending countless evil tentacles towards Nicolas Flamel, attempting to hang up all those who dared to intrude upon this place. Nicolas pinched the monocle carved from crystal in his right eye socket, but did not immediately try to steal the other party's abilities. This was a half-mad fool who had been contaminated by the heavenly venerate of the fool. Without the aid of the river of eternal darkness, attempting to steal his power would likely steal the will of the awakening heavenly venerate of the fool along with it. At that time, the fusion of the Angel of Thief pathway and the Angel of Seer pathway would turn the birth of the Lord of the Mysteries into an almost irreversible outcome. He was waiting for something, and the slippery tentacles had already reached his face. Nicolas had already made it difficult for this Angel of Seer pathway to accurately grasp his spirit thread by stealing the spirit threads of other secret puppets. When the slippery hand reached over, he did not retreat but advanced, taking a step forward and actively meeting the countless slippery tentacles that stretched towards him, actively approaching the swarming worms still sitting on the stone chair. The countless slippery tentacles touched the body of Nicolas Flamel, the Worm of Time. Traces of oozing liquid appeared on his skin, and then this sequence one angel disintegrated, his body turning into a torrent-like tide, more and more, endless, rushing towards the worm vortex on the stone chair with a fierce and irresistible momentum. In Euclidean space, Tang ignited a tablecloth engraved with various mysterious symbols and magical marks. This image, originating from the historical void, recorded the simplified ritual magic of praying to the magic book, the water god Seethot. By igniting the tablecloth and burning the corresponding objects to activate the ritual magic, he received a response from the magic books on the top floor of the library at Miskatonic University in the next moment. Self-existent and eternal, everything lost is only accompanying the ancient scholars in another way. During the 300 years, studying the combination of ritual magic and the abilities of ancient scholars was the basic quality of an ancient scholar who was about to advance to sequence 3 at that time. And the facts prove that the extraordinary abilities of ancient scholars are quite useful in certain times. The water god Seethot is a comprehensive research work on the Deep Ones in the Cthulhu mythos. It mentions many undersea cities and refers to Father Dagon and Mother Hydra as the leaders of the Deep Ones. The Great Cthulhu and its star spawn are also the subjects of its detailed research. The book contains a large number of descriptions of Cthulhu, about the Deep Ones and its worshippers, and a large number of descriptions of the marine environment and its internal changes. These texts recording the marine environment are also the object of prayer for ritual magic, and produce the effect of the knowledge of activation. The unclean ocean swallowed all the secret puppets. In this instant, all the secret puppets submerged in the seawater turned into corpses dissolved in the seawater, and more slippery and evil tentacles surged out from the place where Nicolas Flamel dissolved into seawater and poured into the secret puppet hall. Tang continued to pull the image from the historical void. While observing the state of Antigonus on the stone chair through the authority of Euclidean space, He continued to ignite the tablecloth in his hand, sacrificing the mysterious symbols and magical marks jointly engraved with countless silver and gold. Facts have proved that the sequence 3 antiquarian of the seer pathway, once matched with the corresponding ritual magic that can be quickly released, will directly become a powerful mobile warehouse storing various mystical bombs. If you use professional terms, this is a large-scale, high-precision spellcasting with fast and no CD, and all of them will be DPS magic damage with high attack speed and high damage. By continuously pulling the tablecloth corresponding to the corresponding ritual magic, Tang is further exerting influence, causing Antigonus, who is already at a disadvantage in the battle with the Heavenly Venerate and is only one step away from becoming a true Heavenly Venerate of the Fool, to rapidly decline. Quickly weaken the opponent to achieve the purpose of further control. At that time, whether it is made into a secret puppet or other methods, when it reaches a safe threshold, Nicola will steal the extraordinary characteristics in the opponent's body. This kind of behavior of directly stealing the corresponding extraordinary characteristics from the body of an extraordinary person is almost impossible to achieve in ordinary battles. Only by completely controlling this Angel of Seer pathway sequence 1 can it be possible to steal the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness without killing the opponent. As for why not kill? Why doesn't the goddess of the Evernight kill Antigonus to take away the uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics? Is it because she doesn't want to? Killing the other party will only lead to worse results. It is possible that the miracle invoker, resurrected from the dead, is not Antigonus, but directly the Heavenly Venerate of the Fool, or the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness of Antigonus directly activate after losing Antigonus, a carrier that has endured pollution, which is also equivalent to the further resurrection of the Heavenly Venerate of the Fool. Cannot be killed, can only be stolen, sealed, suppressed, and secretly sealed Antigonus through some means. The Misty Town was established for this reason. No one wants the former Heavenly Venerate of the Fool to be resurrected. After all, that is the real, terrifying existence. Compared to such a bizarre outer deity, whether it was the 7 orthodox gods, or the evil gods and those outer gods still outside the barrier, the outer gods would have preferred the Lord of the Mysteries to not be born. The orthodox gods and evil gods on earth would have preferred a change in the Lord of the Mysteries. Now that Antigonus is within Mist Town, influenced by the goddess of the night, I can at least grind him down slowly. The 7 gods and the barrier are still there, the outer gods can't penetrate. Aemon has also been beaten by me to sequence 2. Adam hasn't advanced to visionary yet. The primordial witch and the hermit. One is in the wrong state, and the other is the nemesis of the system. If the former comes, the goddess of the night can directly stop her, even reducing that evil god back to the pure uniqueness and extraordinary characteristics. As for the latter, would the hermit dare to come? Although I don't know what state this thing is in, whether it was contaminated and activated by the knowledge more, another trick of that source, or some other problem that caused it to suddenly come alive. But the system's mission is clearly written here. If the hermit dares to come, then he will give up this preparation to advance to sequence 1, and pull in those future sequence 1s, those true gods and marionettes, and send the hermit to the Western Paradise on the spot. In the original story, Klein didn't have my conditions when he became King of Angels and advanced to the Fool. While burning the tablecloth to quickly achieve the effect of a portable ritual magic release, Tang also observed the hull that had been completely submerged by seawater. Inside, countless corpses floated up and down, and more slippery, huge tentacles rose from the bottom of the water. The Book of Iban is also known as the Livre d'Iban, which records Sothagua and his formless spawn, the Serpent People, Abath, Atlach Nacha, and the iceworm Rilim Shai Hulad, and echoes the Necronomicon in many ways. The 3 magic books together record the ancient gods sleeping on Earth, the Great Cthulhu. It depicts a monster, vaguely human in shape, but with a head like an octopus with many tentacles, a body like a gelatinous substance covered in scales, giant claws, and a pair of narrow wings behind it. It has a bloated, fat body, dripping with mucus, and its huge green body stumbles out of the dark opening, into people's sight, like a mountain walking between heaven and earth. The latest novels are first published on Apex Novel. The unclean ocean completely submerged this hall filled with marionettes. The seawater submerged the ancient stone seats, along with the vortex formed by countless worms hugging together, with countless slippery tentacles extending from above, all submerged in the deep, dark sea. The bottom of the hull seemed to have collapsed, and it seemed to be connected to the deep sea. Beneath the cold seawater was a deep sea that stretched for thousands of miles and could not be seen. Looking at the dark, endless abyss, it was as if one had come to a dark, enclosed abyss, unable to struggle. In that seabed, there is a city. It is an incomparably huge city. The structure of the city is similar to futurist art, but the structure of the buildings is completely distorted. These buildings are built of huge green stone that is too large to come from Earth. Its unprecedented spatial structure and dimensional size, magnificent stone statues and gorgeous reliefs, make the entire city exude a strong unclean aura. At first glance, it makes people nauseous, and it is impossible to describe such a city with any language or senses. This is Cthulhu's sleeping place, the city of Relia, derived from ancient secrets. Huge, slippery tentacles slowly drifted out from the ancient city called Relia. Its tentacles originated from a head, a huge, terrifying, unclean, insane thing that could bring absurd fear to people just by looking at it. In his house at Relia, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. In the bottomless ocean, Tang stood in the center of this dark environment, watching the worm vortex that seemed even more frenzied because of Cthulhu's appearance. A large amount of mental shock, a large-scale mental pollution, the mere appearance of an outer god's phantom represents some kind of extreme mental destruction. If the sanity is not enough, or if the person is already on the verge of a mental breakdown, the san value will return to zero the first moment they see this scene, directly collapsing into countless pieces of flesh and dying, which is a reasonable thing. But this is only limited to the situation where there is no equivalent thing in the target's body. As Tang expected, when the three magic books, the Necronomicon, the Book of Iban, and the Divermis Mysteries, jointly responded to the ritual, the mental pollution of the knowledge more and that infinite knowledge came alive. And the mad knowledge was constantly pouring into the mind of the individual named Antigonus in a material and occult way such as seeing, hearing, touching, and understanding. As a third-party force, it forcibly inserted itself into the tug-of-war between Antigonus and the celestial worthy of good fortune. This caused the celestial worthy's initial awakening will to be instantly subjected to a large amount of intense invasion from other mental pollutions that were crazy and without reason. Under this stimulation, the wriggling worms kept trembling, and a layer of faint gray mist seemed to appear on them. During the mist, Tang saw an eye in the constantly wriggling worm vortex that looked extremely calm, but harbored madness, looking at him. In just one encounter, the unobservable state of Euclidean space was broken. Tang felt that the spirit worms in his body were going crazy. They all left his body and turned into one crazy and irrational insect after another. They were mad. They were strengthened in the mystical sense by the initial awakening will of the Lord of the Mysteries, the will of the celestial worthy, because they were too close to the King of Angels of the Seer Pathway Sequence 1, too close to the uniqueness of this pathway and the celestial worthy who had initially awakened. At this moment, Antigonus, who was already half collapsed, felt that his spiritual threads were being manipulated. Nicholas Flamel, the King of Angels of the Thief Pathway who had turned into an ocean, was trying to manipulate his spiritual threads. Because of the forced intervention of the third-party force, Antigonus faintly had a state of getting rid of madness. The initially awakened celestial worthy coldly watched the huge, unclean building at the bottom of the deep sea and the great existence in the building. He did not forcibly get rid of the current state, nor did he try to regain his spiritual threads, but looked at Tang, who was already in a state of semi-loss of control. This Lord of the Mysteries who had once fallen, smiled. "You thought, hiding in the dark, you couldn't affect me? It wouldn't be easy to try and deceive the Lord of the Mysteries, who held the authority to fool, a second time using the same method." Tang, already in a state of semi-loss of control, also realized this. My loss of control means that all individuals that this identity can represent will lose control. This is a deliberately created error. Antigonus ate a mixed bag. Before advancing to Sequence 1, King of Angels, the extraordinary characteristics within his body were not necessarily all from the seer pathway. What a gluttonous little girl, Tang couldn't help but grit his teeth and curse inwardly. As the celestial worthy at the peak of the thief, seer, and apprentice pathways, he could naturally, under the circumstances of being able to initially interfere with the Saphiric Castle, display the abilities of a high-sequence thief by borrowing the extraordinary characteristics of the same pathway within his body. Tang's face began to distort. Zaradul, disguised using the faceless ability, revealed his true appearance, but the bug deliberately created by the celestial worthy did not directly affect Tang, who was hidden somewhere. The error was directed to a figure hidden in Zaratul's shadow. That was Tang, who was manipulating Zaratul's spirit threads, an image originating from the historical void. A master of puppets never participates in battle personally. As the most outstanding magician walking the world, Tang understood this principle quite well and was happy to put it into practice. And a magician never performs unprepared. Nicholas Flamel, this sequence 1 King of Angels, also created the same bug, actively interfering with the error created by the celestial worthy, causing an error in identity between Zaradul and Tang, so that only Zaradul and the historical void image lost control, while the main body was unaffected. The celestial worthy's will, realizing the problem, instantly focused its attention on Nicholas Flamel, the King of Angels of the thief pathway, who was manipulating his spirit threads. As Tang's marionette, Nicholas naturally possessed spirit worms originating from the miracle invoker within his body. As a marionette of a miracle invoker, he naturally possessed the extraordinary power of a miracle invoker. He was not only a King of Angels of the thief pathway, but also possessed the extraordinary abilities of the seer pathway. But the next moment, Nicholas, who should have been manipulating Antigonus and making him into a marionette, suddenly stiffened. He seemed to have turned into a machine, his thoughts were rapidly dulling, and his body's movements became rigid. Displaying spirit threads in front of the King of Angels of the seer pathway was tantamount to throwing oneself into the net. Extending to the unclean city thousands of miles away, standing in a city constructed of countless green stones, with the style of the Fourth Epoch Tudor Trentso's empire, he narrowed his eyes as he looked at the swarming worms still twisting and wriggling on the stone chair in the deep sea. He raised his hand, and the power bestowed by the Supreme Being emanated from Zaratul's body, and the historical void image that had already lost half its control was also about to return to the historical void. Since the loss of control originated from the revived celestial worthy's will, then as long as there was no corresponding cornerstone to support the celestial worthy's revival, the loss of control brought about by the celestial worthy's revival would naturally disappear and disintegrate. This was also a bug. Through the interference of Zaradul and Tang from the historical void image, under the impact of a large amount of mental pollution, the celestial worthy's will was dragged into a strange state by this deep sea created by the ritual jointly responded to by 3 magic books. The countless wriggling, huddled worms suddenly paused. They seemed to have fallen into a pool of asphalt that had not yet dried, becoming slow and heavy, no longer flexible, and no longer constantly spreading terrifying malice and crazy influence around them. This was similar to the Black Knight pathway's forced entry into a dream. The occult meaning of the sentence, "In his house at Reliat dead Cthulhu waits dreaming," is that people with low sand values are more likely to suffer pollution from crazy knowledge, and after directly viewing Cthulhu or being active in a specific area for a period of time, they will fall into a nightmare composed of crazy knowledge. Once they cannot break free, they will face madness until death and become a miserable end enslaved by knowledge. As the representative of knowledge is power, the knowledge more is the incarnation of knowledge itself, so the crazy knowledge it exudes can naturally present enough status and powerful influence. But the celestial worthy of good fortune is difficult to be completely killed by ordinary means, and the pollution of the knowledge more cannot directly collapse the mental defenses of this one of the 3 pillars, the Lord of the Mysteries. But for Tang, these actions were enough to delay for a while. As long as it was delayed until Nicholas Flamel stole the extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness from Antigonus's body, then the Lord of the Mysteries will revived in Antigonus's body would be greatly weakened. After all, the reason why he went mad was partly due to the large reduction of anchors, and also because the fool's uniqueness contained a large amount of the more crazy celestial worthy of good fortune's will than the other 2 pathways. At the moment when the celestial worthies will was dragged into Cthulhu's eternal dream, standing in the Relia Palace, in the territory surrounded by countless tentacles, Tang looked at the huddled worms. The Supreme Being is watching you. He has given you the power of grace. Sequence 2, Observer, self-existent and eternal, self-improving and constantly strong. The grace of the Observer is constant, forcibly pulling Antigonus's will, which had already fallen into a disadvantage in the battle with the celestial worthies' will, back to the standard line. The dazed Antigonus had not yet taken any action, but he heard a wonderful and ethereal voice in his ear that did not belong to any language of the present, but seemed to be the source of all languages. The Supreme Being casts his gaze upon you. He has fixed your destiny. Your destiny is to break free from the Lord of the Mysteries, to break free from the erosion of the celestial worthy of good fortune's consciousness. Destiny is fixed, forming a definite number. The sapling in Tang's body, which had been motionless, seemed to have grown a little, extending small branches towards the land of emptiness. These were weak branches, seemingly so fragile that they would break if bent at will. But these branches were connected to the huge branches extending from the void, which was the power originating from the future. The echo of fate intertwined with the past and the future. And after the state of crazy knowledge and the blessing of the Supreme Being were superimposed on each other, the huddled worms seemed to have a tendency to riot again in the next moment. The Lord of the Mysteries' will was strong enough. This was the era when the celestial worthies' will had not yet been weakened due to the arrival of the apocalypse. The ancient god wanted to break free from the dream created by Cthulhu after realizing the abnormality and return to the real world. Tang put his hands in front of his body, and guided the entire Euclidean space, pressing towards Antigonus's direction. At this moment, the Lord of the Mysteries' will returned, and the already crazy Antigonus became even crazier. Dense gray-white mist continued to spread around, and the gray-white space above the spirit world also trembled. Nicholas Flamel, manipulated by the marionette, suddenly widened his pupils. He seemed not to have anticipated the Lord of the Mysteries' return to be so swift. Almost miraculously, this angel of the thief pathway fell into an even more rigid state, seemingly only one step away from being fully marionetted. This was the Lord of the Mysteries, this was the celestial worthy of heaven and earth. The spirit world creatures once again raised their heads. This time, the tremor from the Sephiric castle was even more intense, as if it might reveal its original form at any moment. That grayish-white fog extended beyond the spirit world, seemingly wanting to touch a specific corresponding coordinate. But at this moment, a soft black velvet curtain appeared from nowhere, covering the space where countless grayish-white mists surged. The soft, black velvet curtain-like substance concealed the area corresponding to the spirit world coordinates. The grayish-white mist wanted to try to find the corresponding passage, but it vaguely discovered that the thing summoning it, calling to it, had disappeared at some unknown time, returning to secrecy. There was no echo. The Sephiric castle currently had no master. All its actions stemmed from the arrangements left behind by the Sephiric castle's previous master, the celestial worthy of heaven and earth. The rigid, mechanical Sephiric castle could not autonomously perform precise operations without someone manipulating it. Mount Horamage, in the Church of Misty Town. Tang's pupils reflected the wriggling worms emitting grayish-white mist. He did not pay attention to Nicholas, who had been preliminarily marionetted, but placed his hands in front of his chest, one above the other, clasped together. Countless, glittering and dazzling things emerged from the deep sea. They were shadowy, between illusion and reality, existing in the real world yet detached from it, both contradictory and unified. They gathered in large numbers, surged towards the worms formed by Antigonus's loss of control, and then enveloped the twisted worms. A large amount of glittering debris wrapped them up, one group after another, again and again. The countless twisting worm vortexes struggled. In the next moment, they did something. Nicholas Flamel appeared behind the stone chair. He pinched the monocle he wore in his right eye socket, and in his dull eyes, Tang's shadow was reflected. The newest novels are first published to ** website address **. This Angel King, who had already been made into a marionette, stretched out his hand. He seemed to want to steal some of Tang's abilities, interrupting the spell that the other party was casting. The wriggling worms all looked towards Tang. They huddled together, and countless mysterious spiritual patterns appeared on one slippery tentacle after another, forming a symbol composed of half an eyeless eye and half a twisted line. They. With a boom, crazy, filthy, and terrifying knowledge swept through Antigonus's mind like a tide. Even the celestial worthies will seemed rigid and dull at this moment. Nicholas Flamel sent out the crazy knowledge belonging to the knowledge more that he had already stolen. They exploded, at close range, using the connection of the spirit threads. A mass of crazy knowledge was stuffed into Antigonus's head by Nicholas, the Angel King. Countless crazy knowledge was trembling, trembling, trembling. They were destroying everything known and unknown, wanting to turn everything into a crazy wave, and restore them all to the essence of knowledge itself. The same method cannot be used twice against the Lord of the Mysteries, but it can be used again in a different way. At this moment, Nicholas changed from being dull back to his smiling appearance. He pinched his monocle and smiled at the twisted, wriggling worms in front of him. Tang, taking advantage of the chaos caused by the crazy knowledge being forcibly stuffed into Antigonus's brain at close range, pressed hard with his fingers, pouring in spirituality. The surrounding glittering crystals enveloped the twisted, wriggling worms, the grayish-white mist that spread wildly around, and the countless trembling, bizarre tentacles. Compress. Compress again. Spirituality urged the entire Euclidean space to respond. While Tang consumed a large amount of spirituality, he borrowed power from his past self, using the authority of miracles to restore his own spiritual consumption. Finally, the countless glittering crystals stopped surging towards the stone chair. There, a perfect cube-shaped object appeared, emitting a faint light. The thing trapped in the faintly glowing cube was now motionless. This was the influence of Euclidean space on Antigonus, a thing evolved from the core extraordinary ability of Sequence 2, Observer. The surrounding deep sea receded rapidly, the collapsed ground returned to its original state, and the ground was covered with corpses lying in disarray. One slippery tentacle after another grew out of the countless corpses. The influence of Cthulhu's appearance caused these corpses to be polluted by the knowledge more. At this moment, they stood up one by one, all wearing monocles. Nicholas stood behind the stone chair, seemingly unaffected by the Cthulhu knowledge, and once again pinched the monocle in his right eye socket, as if carved from crystal. An interesting plan, he said to Tang. The celestial worthy's reaction was indeed as you expected. He first controlled my spirit threads. But Nicholas Flamel was a marionette. Can a marionette be marionetted again by a marionette master? Naturally not. And since he was a marionette, then the spirit threads would naturally be in the hands of the marionette master who marionetted him. Unless he directly seized the spirit threads controlled by the marionette master, how could he change the marionette's dominance? Then the question was, whose spirit threads was the Lord of the Mysteries manipulating, and who did he marionette? As the embodiment of deceit and pranks, this is indeed in line with the standards of a prank, isn't it? Tang, walking to the stone chair, smiled and once again borrowed spirituality from his past self to quickly restore his own state. Nicholas Flamel is equipped with a bionic marionette module, and that module has false spirit threads. Oh dear, Eamon was careless. How could the Lord of the Mysteries be so careless too? They both stepped into the same pit. How about making sure that what you are facing and manipulating is the main body? Well, pay attention next time, don't step into the same pit for the third time. Tang looked at the cube on the stone chair, pondered for a moment, and asked, can you steal it now? Nicholas pinched his monocle, looked at the state of the cube, and nodded. No problem. Patting the cube placed on the stone chair, Tang then took out the corresponding 9 kinds of spirit world specialties from the system space, and prepared to pray to the night goddess, requesting the other party to lift the hidden effect imposed on the misty town. Whether it is the advancement ceremony of Sequence 1 of the seer pathway, or the simplified ceremony to become a god that needs to be carried out next, it requires the participation of the spirit world, and cannot be in a closed environment where internal and external communication is impossible. The cat box is like a thought experiment once in the field of quantum mechanics. A cat is placed in a box that cannot be observed. There is a poison inside. The poison has a 50% probability of volatilizing and killing the cat, and a 50% probability of remaining intact, so the cat survives. In this way, before the box is opened, the state of the cat is a superposition of being alive and dead. The cat box, created by the observer, can create an unobservable field similar to the box Schrödinger's cat is in. The things in it will always be in a state of constant superposition, neither out of control nor truly awake. Now, the huddled worms trapped in the perfect cube not only possess Antigonus's own will, but also possess the ability of the heavenly venerate of fortune and mystical yellow to indirectly influence the source castle. However, this kind of extraordinary power also has certain limitations, and it is not omnipotent. The two opposing states must be in a delicate balance. Once the probability of a certain state occurring is as high as 99%, then the effect of the cat box cannot be effectively exerted, and there is no way to make the things inside present a balanced state. Before using Euclidean space to exert this kind of influence on Antigonus, awakening the other party's will, fixing the corresponding blessings, and superimposing buffs, the initial purpose is to fight against the heavenly venerate of fortune and mystical yellow. To make preliminary preparations for the extraordinary power of this grace pathway that follows. In this way, creating a superposition state in which Antigonus's awakening and the heavenly venerate of fortune and mystical yellow's resurrection are in a delicate balance can not only limit the resurrection of the heavenly venerate of fortune and mystical yellow, but also further increase Nicola's success rate of stealing. Tang put the 9 kinds of spirit world specialties into the pre-prepared distillation bottle. As these 9 kinds of spirit world specialties interacted with each other, and because of the addition of Tang's spirituality, they began to gradually dissolve. The auxiliary materials were ready, and the soon-to-be advanced miracle master looked at Nicola, the angel king of sequence 1. Nicola pinched the monocle carved from crystal. Then, through the cat box, he cast his gaze on Antigonus, who was in a superposition state of completely opposite states of being out of control and awake. At this moment, a large number of mysterious symbols began to appear in the monocle carved from crystal worn by this angel king of the thief pathway. Transparent worms kept surging under the skin of this angel king, and strings of spirit worms wriggled, protruding and denting, evil and strange. As the most top-notch cryptographer, Nicola Flamel began to decipher the mysterious symbolism and characteristics represented by this sequence 1 angel king of the seer pathway, in order to further understand and prepare for the upcoming theft. Beside him, the corpse of Antigonus's marionette was also standing quietly. They were also wearing monocles, looking at Antigonus in the cat box. Their bodies were also parasitized by time worms from Nicola Flamel. They used to be marionettes, but now they have become Nicola Flamel's clones, and have been assigned many extraordinary characteristics of the thief pathway. In the next moment, these time worm clones, which were not small in number and varied in strength, jointly made a move to steal. Each time worm clone is not very strong, at most reaching sequence 3. Nicola did not split out sequence 2 clones. In this case, facing the angel king of the adjacent pathway, even if controlled, the probability of successfully stealing the corresponding extraordinary characteristics is not very high. However, in a large number of repeated thefts, there will always be a few successes in the slim possibility. Tang used the authority of miracle to amplify this possibility, while Nicola was deciphering and calculating the possibilities in all the time worm thefts, and created a bug in the clone that achieved the theft, so that the success of the theft would be counted on Nicola's main body, the Angel King. Although the probability is low, it cannot withstand the large number of times and the speed. Soon, Tang saw a mass of dark and profound things seeping out from the body of Antigonus, the sequence 1 Angel King. There was a strong spiritual imprint from the heavenly venerate of fortune and mystical yellow on it. This kind of extraordinary characteristic contains more heavenly venerate imprints than the extraordinary characteristics of the thief and apprentice sequence 1. If it is directly formulated into a potion, the probability of being out of control and madness will also be much higher than that of ordinary sequence 1. Also stolen were the imprint of the heavenly venerate of fortune and mystical yellow and some other things. Old Zaritul's spiritual imprint. This is the extraordinary characteristic that old Zaratul was ambushed by Mr. Dor and Antigonus in the Four Emperor War and taken away. After this extraordinary characteristic left Antigonus's body, the state of the cat box began to tend to collapse and become unstable. Of the three things in Antigonus's body, the uniqueness is undoubtedly the thing with the most heavenly venerate will. After old Zaratul's spiritual remnant also left Antigonus's body, the barely made balance was broken again, and the probability of the Lord of Mysteries' resurrection increased again. Tang summoned more fragments of Euclidean space, carefully looked at the state inside the cat box, and then said to Nicola, "Directly steal the uniqueness." "Okay." Nicola nodded. Tang then took the dark and dim thing that flowed out of Antigonus's body and poured it into the distillation bottle containing the 9 kinds of spirit world specialties. The extraordinary characteristic and the 9 kinds of spirit world specialties reacted with each other. It seemed that dark and profound things were produced and then disappeared. Eyes without pupils and twisted lines appeared and then sank into the darkness. Finally, this sequence 1 extraordinary characteristic and auxiliary materials were formulated into a sequence 1 potion. This is a position closer to the godhood, and this itself represents some kind of danger. As a seer, as an extraordinary person who can truly feel the future, Tang took a deep breath, looked at the potion as light as air, raised his head, and drank it down. Before the cat box completely collapsed, Nicola was exerting various influences on the fool's uniqueness, trying to strip the connection between the uniqueness and Antigonus. This itself was a rather difficult move. Antigonus's body, mind, and spirit were already in a state of high mystical binding with this uniqueness. Any attempt to separate the two could stimulate the will of the heavenly Lord of primordial beginning, further eroding Antigonus and allowing the Lord of the Mysteries to return completely. But at this moment, the heavenly lords will actually abandon the binding with Antigonus. That mask emerged from the constantly twisting, wriggling mass of worms that was Antigonus. This was not a good thing. Nicola thought. A time worm clone was monitoring Tang's situation. If anything went wrong, he would immediately steal the other party's identity, destiny, and extraordinary characteristics, then let Tang die once, completing a miracle of resurrection from the dead, to brush away the pollution. Before Tang drank the potion, in Tingen, at Khoi University and Tingen University. The sewers beneath these two universities were interconnected, connecting the entire underground of Tingen. It was a complex facility that required long-term, high-cost manpower to maintain. Just then, a section of the sewer system at Khoi University and Tingen University suddenly collapsed. The figure of the war bishop appeared in a corner of Khoi University, while the figure of the dark wolf Kotar was hidden among countless marionettes at Tingen University. This giant wolf, which had survived from the Second Epoch to the present, did not attract anyone's attention. They simultaneously destroyed a portion of the sewer lines at Khoi University and Tingen University, causing the ritual that had lasted for 300 years to suddenly fail. The spirit world, the area of the spirit world corresponding to Tingen. Countless pieces of information and symbols were intertwined. In this world of layered blocks, abstract concepts suddenly seemed to receive a violent impact. Information that had been stagnant for 300 years surged into this area of the spirit world in an instant. Intentions, information, knowledge, symbols and signs, countless things, marionettes and people, the minutiae between marionettes over 300 years, instantly refreshed the concept of this area of the spirit world, and a vivid scroll of life was played out here. A city of marionettes was born, replacing the original Tingen from 300 years ago. Here, there were countless marionettes' births, old age, sickness, and death, with complete life trajectories designed for each marionette. Such a city still stood in the Ava county of Loen, real and tangible. Tang's soul, accompanied by countless spirit worms, roamed the spirit world. His thoughts were constantly fragmented, sometimes turning into an old woman who died in the snowy weather, sometimes turning into a babbling infant who died due to insufficient food, and sometimes turning into a homeless man on the street who felt that even bread that was so hard it could break his teeth was delicious. All sorts of people commonly worshipped in existence, they were both themselves and marionettes. Countless intertwined spirit threads of figures crossed the curtain of time and space, penetrating deep into the night country located on the main peak of the Hornassus Mountains. The newest novels are first published here. Tang immediately had a clear self-positioning, rapidly digesting the potions belonging to old Zaratul and Antigonus in the aftermath of the advancement ritual, and re-establishing new bonds and balances, suppressing the will of the Heavenly Lord of Primordial beginning from reviving and returning once again. In fact, he who was affected by the Supreme One was not too afraid of the factors in the ritual that would affect his own mental state. I am me. The past me is me, the present me is me, and the future me is also me. Sequence 1, Mystery Gatherer. The shadows seemed to come alive, expanding rapidly. Tang's reflection, after he advanced to Sequence 1, looked like a huge monster covered in filth and countless slippery, evil tentacles. Tang glanced at his shadow. Although he had not been too affected by the Heavenly Lord, some details still indicated the existence of the Heavenly Lord of Primordial Beginning's will. He stood in the hall, and the surrounding environment was clearly reflected in his eyes. This misty town had once been swallowed by patches of tranquil darkness. Now, the red moon in the sky was high, and the scarlet moonlight truly fell into this town, allowing it to show a little bit of reality. Next, Tang looked at the semi-transparent mask in Nicola's hand, engraved with half of the pupil-less eye and half of the twisted lines. A slippery tentacle, engraved with many patterns, took the mask from his hand. He looked at this mask, which represented the most important thing on the path to godhood for the full pathway, and slowly hooked the corners of his mouth. Then, the slippery, evil tentacle slowly pressed this mask onto Tang's face. The semi-transparent mask was pressed onto his face, and the more insane, substantial will of the Lord of the Mysteries within it erupted. It was something formed by the combination of flamboyant malice, weirdness, absurdity, and terror, even stronger than the will of the Lord of the Mysteries that he had felt when he faced Antigonus through Zaratul not long ago. But, it's weaker than I thought, he muttered to himself, then reached into the depths of the Euclidean space with his hand that was connected to it, seemingly passing through the veil of history and reaching towards a more distant era. He grabbed something like a behemoth, heavy, cold, and difficult to shake by ordinary means. That was a symbol, a representation. It was the holy radiance formed by the combination of the twisted surface symbolizing space, the twisted lines symbolizing time, and the void eye symbolizing observation. That was a brand new symbol, a symbol that did not belong to the current era. The godhood ritual I chose is to simultaneously fool time and fate. The goddess of the night had already removed the power that concealed the entire town. The interaction between reality and the misty town, the outbreak of the weakened version of the godhood ritual, caused the demigods and angels who were paying attention to the relevant matters to cast their gazes over. Even the dominator behind the curtain of shadows, the symbol of destruction and doom, the incarnation of spirituality and spiritual numbers, was obscurely and coldly examining the newly advanced mystery gatherer who was wearing a semi-transparent mask in the ancient palace. But no one acted. No one dared to act. A great power was casting its gaze from the future, and the starry sky around the crimson moon showed a strange distortion. The countless stars seemed to be constantly blinking eyes. Above the astral world, within the primordial barrier, a twisted, void figure that seemed to not fully exist in the material world was floating uncertainly, seemingly in an extremely special state. He looked at the vast starry sky outside the barrier, and his gaze swept across the red ocean that occupied the moon. Looks like it's really lively, simultaneously fooling time and fate. This was Tang's simplified version of the godhood ritual that he chose for himself. To ensure the ritual could exert sufficient effect, and to maximize the ritual's inherent power under satisfiable conditions, this was the basic quality of an angel of the seer pathway. Magicians never perform unprepared shows. The past, present, and future intertwine. This is fooling time. This book is first published on the entire network by TWKAN, COM. The formless sacred radiance, pulled from the gaps in history, transformed into brilliant light upon entering the real world, piercing through the walls of the hall, penetrating the dense darkness here, and radiating madly towards the entire mist town, centered on the church. In the mist town, which had been relieved of its hidden state, the crimson moon overhead was instantly obscured by the dazzling light. That light instantly engulfed the entire mist town, which was originally the city of the dead, created by Antigonus, the city of night ruled by the former king of angels of the seer pathway before he went mad, together with the mother goddess of the sky. The stars in the sky flickered constantly, like eyes blinking one after another. Now, in the world engulfed by brilliant light, the broken walls and ruins were being repaired, the weathering disappeared, the collapses recovered, and the marionettes that had fallen to the ground on the streets and were already rotting were standing up one after another. Their faces, the rotting flesh and bones on their bodies were being restored, and the already rotten clothes were being reshaped. Ashes reappeared on their bodies, restoring the original simple appearance, restoring the city of the dead, belonging to the marionettes. And rather than saying that this was a historical gap image dragged out by an ancient scholar, it was better to say that the time of the entire city of the dead was rapidly reversing. The marionettes, who had lost control and had completely turned into dead corpses after falling to the ground, stood up again. They were no longer as stiff and rigid as before. Sincere smiles appeared on their faces. The marionettes who believed in the mother goddess of the sky, before their deaths, were manipulated by the spirit body order line, and walked into the city of the dead in a tight and orderly manner, becoming Antigonus's marionettes, living in this small town that was not very large. The city of the dead of the past once again manifested under the shroud of countless glories. This fooled time, causing the scene that had been destroyed 100 years ago, the city of the dead in the period when Antigonus was not mad, to emerge on the main peak of the Hornassus Mountains in the Fifth Epoch. I am the mysterious servant, an angel who serves the mysterious, and also the supreme, an observer. And this fooled fate. After advancing to sequence 1, the sapling symbolizing self within Tang's body grew rapidly, taking root in the spirit body, absorbing nutrients, and growing vigorously. He was him, but not just him. The sacred radiance that was pulled out did not only represent such a near miraculous reversal of time. Nicola looked around, and then, this king of angels of the thief pathway looked towards the top of his head, towards the sky, seemingly penetrating layers of barriers, and seeing a certain unknown existence. In the astral world, within the formless barrier, that illusory figure, void, flamboyant, supreme, and great, as if overlooking the entire world, opened its arms, looked at this endless starry sky, and quietly accepted the countless bizarre human faces and countless kinds of extremely crazy gazes from outside the barrier. Those were countless outer gods who were attracted by the source quality, or who had lost their own source quality and stayed here, trying to take back those foods. That was the most powerful outer god in the entire universe, who stood at the apex of all things, a symbol, a pillar. I am the past, the present, and the future. I am the cause, the result, and the process. I both look down from above and hide in the world. I witness creation and also witness destruction. I, in my name, the master of time and space, the supreme dimension, the destiny of fate. Wrapped in an invisible force that continuously radiated around, the illusory figure passed through the barrier that protected the entire world but had already developed cracks, and slowly stepped into the real starry sky. Those countless twisted faces, crazy spirits, one swollen piece of flesh after another, and the explosion of desire, all kinds of things crazily swept towards him, but passed through the other party and collided on the invisible barrier. They could not penetrate the barrier and delve into it along the route the other party had taken. Why, who, grab it. This discovery angered the existences residing on certain stars, and while they focused their attention on the illusory figure walking out of the barrier, the other party's body had already begun to disintegrate piece by piece. Countless brilliant fragments merged into the astral world, into the real starry sky, turning into nutrients for something within what was protected by the invisible barrier, helping it grow vigorously, growing more branches, and extending upwards. The sapling in Tang's body grew larger, Euclidean space was shaking, it was rising, and the high-dimensional space covering the entire world was eroding outwards little by little. It was beating, trembling, as if at this moment, in this unchanging space, an even more terrifying and incomprehensible thing was being conceived. It needed nutrients that could help it grow once again. The main peak of the Hornassus Mountains, in Mist Town. In the hall, the mask engraved with the symbol of half an eyeless eye and half a twisted line was gradually merging into Tang's body, and the uniqueness containment ritual sufficient to serve as a godhood ritual was completed quite perfectly. Simultaneously fooling time and fate, at this moment of interaction, if the extraordinary characteristic on the Saphiric Castle was in hand, perhaps Tang could directly become the fool. A new, half-fool, was about to be born, and at this moment, Tang took out a monocle carved from crystal from his pocket and suddenly put it into his right eye socket. Nicolas Flamel, this king of angels of Sequence 1, perfectly completed a bug with such a symbolic action. He replaced Tang's identity, parasitized his marionette master, and through the connection of mysticism, stole the other party's authority and identity at an extremely fast speed, replacing the other party's ritual effect, and preparing to begin containing the uniqueness of the thief pathway. A clone belonging to Nicolas Flamel, standing not far from Tang, also raised his hand, preparing to steal the Sequence 1 extraordinary characteristic that Tang had just contained, as well as the mask, and all of the extraordinary characteristics from Sequence 2 to Sequence 9. Resurrection from the dead is a miracle. Tang was preparing to die and use the 4 chances of resurrection from the dead of the miracle invoker to resurrect and stop his act of containing the uniqueness. But the translucent mask was out of control at this time. Not only was it not under the control of Nicolas Flamel's clone's theft, but it also did not leave Tang's face because Tang was replaced, losing the containment object, and having to leave regretfully. The uniqueness of the seer pathway had already integrated into the body of Nicolas Flamel, the parasite who was the angel king of the marauder pathway. Nikolai, who had replaced the main body, discovered this, but he wasn't surprised by the sudden variable, as if he had predicted that such a thing would happen. The celestial worthy's will is manifested clearly enough in Antigonus. This Lord of Mysteries obviously knows what I want to do. How could he so easily let go of the seer pathway uniqueness that is deeply bound to Antigonus? As a top-tier deceiver, the celestial worthy's obvious display could only mean one thing. This was a conspiracy in broad daylight. The other party had already observed the ripples of fate, confirming that he would inevitably use the seer pathway uniqueness as a medium and simplified godhood ascension ritual to accommodate the marauder pathway uniqueness. In that case, whether he resisted or cooperated, the final result would be the same. This situation was similar to that in the West Continent. Everyone knew that the celestial worthy was behind it, but they couldn't prevent the birth of a new Lord of Mysteries, giving the celestial worthy a chance to return. The most insidious conspiracy is often a conspiracy in broad daylight. Even if you know there's a problem with this matter, you have to jump into the pit, just like everyone knows that the Lord of Mysteries must be born. Otherwise no one can escape when facing the arrival of the apocalypse. Now, Nikolai had replaced Tang's identity and fate, and was about to use Tang's ritual to accommodate the marauder pathway uniqueness. The semi-transparent mask was also about to completely integrate into Tang's body. The newest novels are first published at. The parasite had completed its parasitism. Nikolai's clone was preparing to steal Tang's Beander characteristics, allowing him to die and be reborn. At the same time, at this moment, a brilliant light flashed in Tang's eyes. Countless more brilliant crystals appeared around, enveloping his body, forming a cube floating in midair, emitting a faint light. Tang put himself into a cat box. After entering an unobservable state, the cat box will have a superposition of 2 possibilities. Either I accommodate the seer pathway uniqueness, or Nikolai accommodates the marauder pathway uniqueness. The former would lead to him becoming the angel king of the seer pathway 1+1, while the latter would result in Nikolai becoming the angel king 2+1. And the seer pathway uniqueness entering Nikolai, who had the marauder pathway, could instantly inflate and activate the celestial worthy's will, allowing him to more deeply affect the Saphiric Castle, and thereby reclaim Tang's mystery prior Beander characteristics and the mystery prior Beander characteristics within Antigonus. In this way, the return would be completed. This was the consequence of one possibility in the cat box superposition state, so a balance appeared. However, before the cat box is release, I can simultaneously use Nikolai's sequence 1 Angel King ability, and also use the newly acquired Mystery Prior's power. He was himself, and now he was also equivalent to Nikolai Flamel. Since he had decided to face the Lord of Mysteries, this top-tier deceiver, Tang wouldn't underestimate this incarnation of the original will, the master of the Saphiric Castle, one of the most powerful pillars. Even if he had already died, his will and spirit would forever remain within all Beyonders, unable to be erased. Now I am in the superposition state of 2 uniqueness accommodation rituals. Tang pinched the monocle in his right eye socket, not panicking much, and communicated with Nikolai, who had parasitized him. At worst, he just wouldn't accommodate it. If he and Nikolai gave up the ritual and only used the uniqueness as a Beyonder item, it wouldn't be a big deal. If it wasn't for the fact that after I accommodate the uniqueness, it would cause the past me to be unable to directly pull the historical void image of the future, becoming half a fool, it wouldn't be a big deal. He looked at Nikolai's clone outside the cat box, then knocked on the barrier of the cat box, and asked Nikolai, "What is the essence of a wrong godhood ascension ritual?" Creating a large-scale error, replacing the other party's fate, identity, and status, and using the other party's fate, identity, and status to complete the positioning of one's own fate and error. From a mystical perspective, as long as the replaced person has an extremely high status, this ritual can also be completed. The ritual was not the purpose, and not all rituals were immutable. As the Angel King of the Marauder pathway, Nikolai clearly understood the role of the Godhood Ascension ritual. Theoretically, as long as a ritual with the same effect was designed, the accommodation of the uniqueness could also be completed. Why replace the Angel King who was in the advancement ritual? Naturally, it was because the other party was closest to the pinnacle of the sequence pathway at this moment, but had not reached the level of sequence 0. If the Godhood Ascension ritual failed and the replaced person fell or had their status reduced, then as a BUG that had already become a true god, all the incarnations of error could naturally expel the replaced person's 3 sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics and the uniqueness of that pathway. If the replaced person was a true god, then the wrong Godhood Ascension ritual could also be performed. It's just that with this method of becoming a god, not to mention how high the probability of completion is, becoming a sequence 0 bug, if the replaced person is not an apprentice, the seer pathway sequence 0, then what needs to be born is very likely to be all the sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics and uniqueness of 2 different pathway sequence 0s. Unable to expel the Beyonder characteristics and uniqueness that do not belong to this pathway in a short period of time, half madness is the best ending. Okay, Tang sighed, thinking about it this way, the celestial worthy is quite miserable. Thinking about it this way, he had tricked the celestial worthy twice, or was it 3 times? At this time, above the unreachable astral world, in the vast starry sky. I am the past, the present, and the future. I am the cause, the result, and the process. A grand and layered voice echoed in the cat box. Look, isn't this a ready-made ritual? As Tang, who was in the superposition state of the cat box, once again pinched the monocle in his right eye socket, said somewhat mockingly. His simplified Godhood Ascension ritual was fooling time and fate. When fate appeared intertwined and bifurcated, Tang at this time was both equal to himself of sequence 1, and also the illusory projection from the future that had turned into nourishment. That illusory projection had the status, authority, and power of the domain of destiny. Doesn't this count as me replacing myself, and myself, in a certain instant, replacing a certain old one? Since there was a problem with him as a seer, then wouldn't it be enough to change the replacement target? It's not like there's only one alternative. At this moment, the astral world, under the grafting authority of the mystical servitor, was bizarrely grafted together with the night country atop the main peak of the Hornassus Mountains. As an angel who had already advanced to sequence 1, and simultaneously possessing the extraordinary abilities of the sequence 1 time worm of the adjacent pathway in this state, Tang easily grafted the 2 together, connecting the Hornassus main peak with the astral world. Above the astral world, Outside the barrier, that illusory, distorted figure was constantly collapsing. Countless concepts and information, mostly merged with the starry sky, while a small portion, through some unknown channel, resonated with Tang, who was in the cat box, and Nicholas, who was parasitizing his body. Inside the cat box, Tang raised his head and looked at the various symbolic signs protruding from the top and the invisible barrier that isolated the inside from the outside. Beyond the barrier seemed to be a world composed of chaos and deep black, a world that encompassed countless celestial bodies and civilizations, encompassing everything except this planet. And in that world composed of chaos and the deep sea, countless stars seemed to be blinking their eyes, coldly and madly staring at the planet sheltered by this invisible thing. In my name, the ruler of space-time, the supreme dimension, the destiny of fate. The sapling grew, and it, which should have been formless, seemed to grow out of its own body, ascending towards the highest direction along with the growth of countless concepts. It approached the invisible barrier, seemingly wanting to penetrate it and continue to extend outward. It was craving the things outside the barrier, craving the various information and occult concepts left behind after the future him collapsed. But at this moment, Tang stretched out his hand, grabbed the branch that penetrated the cat box, and stretched outward, and expressionlessly pulled it back. That won't do, at least not now. The swaying branch seemed to have its own thoughts. After being caught, it also pondered for a moment, and ultimately did not break through that invisible barrier. Euclidean space also expanded rapidly at this time. In that high-dimensional space that seemed to encompass the entire world, many occult symbols and various magic marks unique to the astral world appeared. They merged with countless brilliant crystals, representing that this space could now also observe more information about the astral world. The astral world is the kingdom of the gods, the last line of defense of the earth beneath the barrier. However, the part of Euclidean space that expanded also did not extend beyond the barrier, to the unprotected, boundless territory. There was a certain danger there. Without a leader, it could not be easily crossed, otherwise some things would pour in along this newly opened channel. At this moment, Tang took the initiative to interrupt his accommodation ritual. He used the monocle and the special superposition state of himself at this time to create a bug, equating the figure outside the astral world that was constantly collapsing into countless brilliant fragments with himself. Tang also used the rapidly expanding Euclidean space to graft himself with the bestowed power of the observer, anchoring himself to the state before the weakened version of the godhood ritual. The cat box shattered. After losing a possibility, the cat box, used for the unobservable domain, lost its function, but Nicholas still parasitized Tang's body. The time worm clone on the side was exceptionally decisive. He stretched out his hand, aimed at Tang's direction, and pulled outward fiercely. The uniqueness accommodation ritual of the thief pathway was activated once again. The possibility of Nicholas's clone stealing Tang's extraordinary characteristics was amplified, and Tang would be forcibly pulled out of his extraordinary characteristics and uniqueness. This act of theft by the time worm clone was successful. This was destiny, and also fate. In the image reflected by the monocle worn in Tang's right eye socket, specks of eerie, terrifying, and bizarre things were constantly separation from his body. A semi-transparent mask with the fool's symbol, which should have been integrated inward but was now wrapped in countless brilliant crystals, reluctantly and quickly moved away from the body that had been parasitized by the time worm, which could almost have resulted in a family reunion of the thief and seer. Reality and the spirit world converged. After the extraordinary characteristics and the fool's mask separated from the original body, spirit worms emerged one after another from the past, present, and future in the historical fog. These spirit worms quickly used the extraordinary characteristics that had separated from the main body as a framework, and under the miracle of resurrection, reconstructed the mystical servitor's new body. The Tang, who was only left with a body, pinched the monocle. The ritual played a quite perfect role. The monocle he was wearing slowly integrated into his eye socket, first leaving a light black frame on the right eye socket, and then this light trace quickly dissolved and disappeared under the effect of the ritual. The uniqueness of the thief pathway was gradually interacting with the spirit body and the time worm hidden within the shell, and erroneous concepts would also be revised. At this moment, on the main peak of the Hornassus Mountains grafted to the astral world, one conceptual oddity after another appeared with loopholes, intertwining with each other to form a more twisted and chaotic new concept. This is the embodiment of all errors. Even the concept itself will have unavoidable loopholes. Great Ring of Destiny. You are the past, the present, and also the future. You are the cause, the result, and also the process. At this moment, Nicholas, who was in the final stages of the accommodation ritual, heard a voice from the depths of the astral world, even further away, from beyond the barrier. That was a voice that had traversed the stars, that had traversed infinite distances, and was transmitted. That was an incomprehensible voice, but under the power of the most top-notch cryptographers, it was deciphered into a language that could be understood. That was a devout prayer in his accommodation ritual, directed at the replaced one. Great Ring of Destiny. Respond to it, Tang's voice sounded in the ear of this king of angels of the thief pathway. Whether it was Tang or Nicholas as a secret puppet, they didn't have too many scruples about dealing with evil gods or those races that believed in evil gods. Okay. Nicholas slightly raised the corners of his mouth. After hearing the instructions of his secret puppet master, his smile grew even bigger. As the accommodation ritual was about to come to an end, he slowly, leisurely, responded to the content of this prayer. Die. Nicholas Flamel, the king of angels of the thief pathway, who had already accommodated the uniqueness and was almost equivalent to the embodiment of all errors, slowly spoke this word with a voice that could leverage natural language. In the next moment, the prayer was twisted, and an irreversible bug appeared in the rules. This word, imbued with supernatural linguistic power, at the culmination of the ritual of acceptance, was also equivalent to that figure emerging from the future. In that brief instant, having usurped the authority of some ancient outer god, it was clearly transmitted, past the universe's erasure, towards the unknown corners where prayers to evil gods sought their blessings. This was akin to a divine oracle, a death warrant issued by a god to their extraordinary followers. This was a bug. This was the first fully staged performance of this angel after accepting the uniqueness. The races who worshipped the outer god known as Destiny would, within this utterance filled with intense malice and curses, find their extraordinary powers riddled with all sorts of contradictions, ultimately exploding in a dazzling display like fireworks. This was an irreversible bug, an unpatchable vulnerability. Beyond the barrier, some magnificent entity seemed to cast its gaze. That great being, separated by that invisible layer, coldly watched Nicola Flamel, who was gazing from afar atop the main peak of the Hornassus Mountains in the astral realm. Watching this king of angels who had twisted some concept, influencing some part of the universe. But between them was a tightly sealed barrier, impossible to break through in a short time. In the seemingly infinitely distant depths of the starry sky, darkness stirred slightly before ultimately returning to stillness. That great being did not care about the death of believers, what it wanted was. Tang's expression twisted. Having completed the ritual of acceptance, his face changed frantically, gradually transforming into the sharply defined features, light brown eyes, and slightly curly, somewhat pale hair of Nicola Flamel. The parasite replaced the parasitized, completed the ritual of acceptance, and became the 2+1 King of Angels. Latest Uptack novel Uptack premieres Uptack at Uptack site. He was only one step away from godhood. This King of Angels looked towards the constantly twisting figure beside him, whose form was emerging as spirit worms drilled out of the historical fog. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly looked towards a certain direction outside the astral realm. There was a strange light. Like the setting sun, a twilight where all things approached their end. That light swept towards Tang at an extremely fast speed, seemingly wanting to rule over this grafted misty town. But also in the next moment, a gentle, peaceful darkness seemed to once again envelop the grafted main peak of the Hornassus Mountains. Night descended on this peak faster than the twilight light, surrounding the misty town layer by layer, constantly concealing it. The dark kingdom where moonflowers and night-blooming Sirius grew together descended, draped in a layered but not cumbersome dark long dress, as if wearing the starry night sky. The figure shrouded in darkness appeared at the edge of this deep, dark heavenly kingdom. He looked at the terrifying giant, huge as a mountain, approaching constantly, wearing dilapidated silver armor, and his voice was as calm as a waveless lake. Barter Hale. The giant, huge as a mountain, paused. The dilapidated mask concealed his face, and a voice, muffled like a great bell, resounded in the starry sky. Ammonizes, step aside. Tang, who had already returned from history, looked at this kingdom ruled by darkness, hooked the semi-transparent mask on his hand, and then, suddenly, smiled. Looks like the god of war has come looking for trouble. He must have sensed something. Nicola, who was beside him, no longer wore the iconic monocle. Now, having accepted such a uniqueness, the King of Angels could gradually change the shape of this uniqueness, which had been dominated by Amon for thousands of years, by constantly changing the concepts of mysticism. After all, he is a true god. Although he is in a sequence that is not good at divination and prophecy, there is one saying that is correct. Never underestimate the power of the gods. Especially since the final fate of the god of war, Barter Hale, was to be made into a secret puppet. The future him who had just arrived, whose body collapsed into countless pieces of information and concepts, helped Euclidean space grow, replaced a certain evil god named Destiny for a time, and helped complete the uniqueness acceptance ritual for the seer pathway, should have left something behind. For example, giving the god of war, Barter Hale, who was looking over there, a fixed number, so that this sequence 0 of the warrior pathway was involuntarily influenced by fate, and eventually walked towards the future that he had observed. After all, he is a god who controls the concept of decline. It is not surprising to be noticed. But, who knows if this is just a fragment of his future? Leave directly. Nicola turned his head to look at his master of puppets. There is no need to create too many conflicts with other true gods at this time. The attitude of the gods will directly affect the attitude of the churches that worship them. Even if that sequence 0 vaguely senses some clues, without truly tearing apart the facade, the seer and thief pathways are not warriors, and the adjacent pathways of night and death will not have such a big conflict. However, in this situation, it is enough to show that even if they, the warrior, night, and death pathways, are not on the same path, and are sequence 1 and the King of Angels standing on the side of the goddess of the night, the god of war, Barter Hale, may not take the opportunity to make a fuss. There are irreconcilable contradictions between adjacent pathways. The goddess of the night and the god of war will inevitably have a battle in the future. Let's see what the goddess's attitude is. Tang looked at the area where darkness and twilight were intertwined. The goddess of the night had obviously appeared as well. But I think that the goddess, without fully grasping the uniqueness of the death pathway and being able to indirectly affect the river of eternal night, will not start a war with the god of war, Barter Hale, at this time. Tang picked up the semi-transparent mask in his hand, then pondered for a moment, and took out a hammer from the system space. It was a small silver hammer, engraved with countless strange patterns, which together formed one mysterious symbol and magical symbol after another, involving or not involving current mysticism. Item information: gold hammer, silver hammer. A magical item provided by the system. Its power depends on the size of the craftsman module's power. Extraordinary power. The gold hammer can temporarily enhance a certain physical, mystical property of the item being hammered, and the silver hammer can temporarily weaken a certain physical, mystical property of the item being hammered. Negative impact: 100 knowledge fragments per hour. After several upgrades of the system, coupled with the foundation of Miskatonic University, it has now eaten the sequence 3 of the seer pathway, the extraordinary characteristics of the master diviner, and the sequence 4 of the scholar pathway, the extraordinary characteristics of the alchemist. This hammer can now just weaken the negative impact of the restricted uniqueness. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. As the silver hammer played its role, Tang slowly put the semi-transparent mask with the fool symbol on his face. After the weakening of mysticism, the will of celestial worthy, whose uniqueness is active enough, has also diminished a lot. Well, this is a limit that can be tolerated and can be resisted and counterbalanced without mobilizing more anchors and self-awareness. After weakening the negative impact of the seer pathway's uniqueness, the semi-transparent mask lightly covered Tang's face, leaving no gaps. His face shape fit perfectly with the semi-transparent mask. Such a mask looked as if it was born for Tang, perfect and flawless. Wearing such a mask, Tang felt that his desire to perform suddenly had some fluctuations. He suddenly had the idea of fooling the world, wanting to mock their intelligence and fool their spirituality in front of other gods, making them collectively intellectually disabled. I'm so tired of being blindly foolish. The corners of Tang's mouth twitched, and he finally controlled the negative impact of the uniqueness on him. Although the ritual of accommodating was ultimately not completed, with such a symbolic ritual process, Nicola can completely create a bug to help me directly mobilize the power of the uniqueness itself, allowing me to reach the level of King of Angels. Moreover, there is also a creeping servant controlled by Zeratul behind him, and Antigonus also has an extraordinary characteristic of the creeping servant in his body. Even if he has to consider the problem of giving up accommodating the uniqueness because he is pulled by the past him to obtain historical void images, he can also become the King of Angels. Whether it is Sequence 1 devouring more extraordinary characteristics or accommodating the uniqueness of this pathway, it is the King of Angels, a step further towards the gods. Will there be a fight? Tang looked at the distant tranquil night in the sense of conceptual decay, withering, and death produced by the interweaving of desolate dusk, slightly turned his body, and looked at the church behind him. In the church, countless puppets that should have been suspended in midair had fallen to the ground. They had smiles on their faces, and in their right eye sockets, they neatly wore a monocle made of crystal. Ah, sorry, I can't change this habit all at once. Nicola also looked at his avatars. After this King of Angels discovered this, those puppets who had been transformed into time worm avatars took off their monocles. However, the smiles on their faces did not change in the slightest. Retaining this habit may have unexpected effects in the future, such as when dealing with some evil spirits who are obviously unaware of the situation. Stuffing a monocle into the right eye socket may have miraculous effects. For example, triggering the achievement of, "I held you when you were a child," or something. Nicola smiled. And in a few moments, the stalemate there finally came to a result. Ah, it seems like there was no fight after all. Not far away, the dusk that was out of tune with the darkness finally receded. The main peak of the Hornassus Mountains, the misty town grafted onto the starry sky, once again entered the kingdom surrounded by darkness, shrouded in peace and silence. A round of scarlet moons rule appeared in the tranquil night. In the depths of the darkness not far away, there seemed to be a certain existence casting its gaze towards him, towards this grafted mountain. Tang bowed slightly towards a certain place in the kingdom ruled by the Scarlet Moon. Nicola also looked in that direction, took off his top hat, and also bowed. This is respect for a god and helper, this is politeness. Afterwards, Tang ended the grafting between the main peak of the Hornassus Mountains and the astral world, allowing this misty town to return to the place where it should have existed. After he wakes up, ask him whether he wants to join us, or whether he is prepared to become my puppet, and then join us. Tang's gaze swept across the walls of the church, looking at Zeratul, who was standing quietly in the depths of the hall, manipulating the still chaotic and ignorant Antigonus, and said. The leader of this secret order nodded after hearing this. The former means joining voluntarily, and the latter means joining passively. Got it. Well, the two Sequence 1 of the seer pathway are also in my hands. Next, it's a very simple sorting problem. After obtaining the two extraordinary characteristics and the uniqueness of Sequence 1 of the seer pathway, integrating the resources of Miskatonic University and the secret order, it can be said that most of the high-level extraordinary characteristics that can be obtained from the seer pathway, either exist in the form of puppets or in the form of sealed items, are already in Tang's hands. Moreover, the uniqueness is also in my hands. Maybe those remaining high-level seers will be unknowingly gathered in Tingen. Next, first smash the never-ending stage, let this sealed item fall to the Sequence 3 level, and then bestow, observer, and let it return to Sequence 2. Forced to open for business, the core of the theater forcibly combined with Euclidean space. Then, after Antigonus makes a choice, take away his Sequence 1 potion, and give the other party a bestowal, so that this former, half-fool, can obtain the extraordinary power of the Creeping Servant through the power of bestowal without losing the Creeping Servant potion. The extra extraordinary characteristic of the Creeping Servant, well, there is no need to be too eager. At that time, Zeratul can re-ingest the Sequence 2 Miracle Inventor potion smashed from the theater, and he can become a true Sequence 2, rather than a bestowed Sequence 2. There is still a bit of a difference between a fake Miracle Inventor and a real Miracle Inventor, but Tang is not just for this little difference. At that time, another Sequence 1 promotion ritual will be held. Using the Sequence 1 extraordinary characteristic in Antigonus's body, Zeratul can also ascend to the position of Sequence 1 creeping servant, and then Nicola will steal the Sequence 1 potion in Zeratul's body, causing Zeratul to fall back to Sequence 2, and then use Observer to bestow a Sequence 1. And I, in the last link, can happily accept that Sequence 1 creeping servant extraordinary characteristic. With several Miracle Inventor extraordinary characteristics, he can create several Sequence 1 creeping servants. On how-to potions can create N Sequence 1 angels while also stacking up a King of Angels JPG. The system listened to its host calculating the accounts there, and was greatly shocked by the final result, 9. Host 6 turned over. So it's a sorting question. As long as the ability radiated from the future is sufficient, then to a certain extent, as long as there are higher-level extraordinary characteristics and a large number of lower-level extraordinary characteristics, then higher-level extraordinary power does not need to use extraordinary characteristics to advance at all, and can be directly obtained through the power of bestowal. For example, if he had the uniqueness of a Miracle Inventor, and a bunch of Sequence 3 Antiquarians' uniquenesses obtained illegally, he could create a team full of Miracle Inventors. Unfortunately, the power of the Observer still requires extraordinary characteristics to support it. To permanently grant Sequence 1 extraordinary power, the recipient must be a Sequence 2 Beander. And extraordinary characteristics are conserved, they neither increase nor decrease. The power of bestowal is also limited, it cannot be demanded at will, nor can it be supplied infinitely. Otherwise, a Sequence 1 could completely extract their extraordinary characteristics, then bestow them permanently, then allow another to advance to Sequence 1, and then continue to extract extraordinary characteristics, generation after generation, endlessly. Even if the apocalypse were imminent and the old ones broke through the barrier, they would have to drink 2 pots of tea before leaving. Leaving Zeratul here to handle the problem, Tang prepared to graft the theater over and leave the main peak of the Hornassus Mountains with Nicola. I have successfully advanced to Sequence 1. In the next period, besides some problems with Miskatonic University itself, there's still the issue in the Rage Sea. The goddess's gift was not without a price. 2 Sequence 1 extraordinary characteristics and the uniqueness of the Seer pathway were exchanged for the uniqueness of the Death pathway, 1 Sequence 1 extraordinary characteristic, and some experimentation. This was a very fair price. The newest novels are first published at. Just as he was thinking about things, as the spirit world coordinates were grafted together with the spirit world coordinates through Euclidean space, and the surrounding area lost the protection of secrecy, revealing a state of overlapping dense color blocks of the spirit world, Tang and Nicola suddenly paused. Their thoughts solidified, as if heading towards a desolate end where even death would decay. All thoughts, consciousness, and the extraordinary items on their bodies involuntarily moved towards a seemingly irreversible end of fate. Bard. Here, Tang saw a figure in the spirit world, seemingly as tall as a mountain, wielding an exaggerated longsword that seemed to be the very concept of decay towards him and Nicola. This deity, who had compromised in the confrontation with the night goddess, had not directly retreated but had silently concealed his figure, waiting in the spirit world for him and Nicola to leave the knight's domain. To leave the protection of the deity. To deliver a fatal blow. And when the mystery servants grafted 2 spirit world coordinates for teleportation, he waited for such an opportunity. When everyone thought that things were over, and the deity had withdrawn his gaze, when vigilance was at its weakest. In the next moment, the longsword, which seemed to be the very concept of decay, pierced through time and space, causing everything, including rules and concepts, to move towards an irreversible withering. Large swaths of life in the spirit world died under the deity's attack, reverting to pure abstract concepts. Tang and Nicola, 2 Sequence 1 angels, watched as the exaggerated longsword fell, crushing their bodies, killing their physical forms, and leading their souls towards an uncontrollable end of decay. With a single strike, no life survived in this area of the spirit world. The tall, mountain-like figure gazed at that area of the spirit world for a long time without saying a word. Seriously, if you can't afford to play, then don't. Inside Miskatonic University, Tang, who had created a sufficiently real historical gap image within Miskatonic University by fooling time and fate to complete the exchange, held the fool's mask and complained to Nicola, who was creating a bug that caused even decay itself to have loopholes. To bypass the goddess and attack us directly, who are you trying to scare? To deal with the high-ranking members of the three sneaky families, could a warrior who seems to have put all his skill points into frontal combat kill them? Huh? Who are you trying to scare? Haha, laughable. However, it seems that we've attracted a bit too much hatred. Bard here doesn't plan to let us go. After fiercely mocking the war god Bard here, who was thinking, the spectator is too strong, let's weaken the warrior, Tang still analyzed the sudden feint just now. This time, a bit too much information was exposed, such as the fact that Nicola Flamel behind Miskatonic University and this Sequence 1 mystery servant, have a certain relationship. But I have already advanced to Sequence 1 of the seer pathway, so I don't have to worry too much about someone suddenly knocking on the door, or a Cha's fee meter or anything. Moreover, what the deities know is not necessarily what the churches know. The war god church of the Faesak Empire may not be clear about what exactly happened. What's more, the Night Church and the war god church are themselves mortal enemies. With the eternal blazing sun, Artisan, Storm, Earth, and other churches already aware of the relationship between Miskatonic University and Tingen, and Nicola Flamel, this new thief pathway Angel King has naturally long been classified into the Night Goddess's camp. Having one more Angel King Nicola Flamel, and one more Sequence 1 Angel of the Seer pathway, Bard here probably wouldn't mind, right? Afterward, pay attention to those who believe in the war god and those beyonders who follow the warrior pathway. There's no need to pay too much attention to the others. Unless the war god personally descends and completely isolates Tang from Euclidean space, the spirit world, and all connections with his puppets, and also guards against bugs and hidden powers that may appear at any time, otherwise, in the real world, wanting to kill a mystery servant like him would really be too difficult. Tang muttered a few words, then stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the world outside. After advancing to Sequence 1, the whole world seemed to have a dizzying feeling once again. Euclidean space and reality are more closely integrated. It is expanding, growing, and has already encompassed the astral world where the gods reside. But it is still unable to break through the defenses of the deities' kingdoms and directly enter for observation. Forcing my way in isn't impossible. Sequence 0 are themselves incarnations of some concepts and symbols. Seeing them through Euclidean space might yield some unimaginable knowledge, but this will inevitably trigger their vigilance. Tang thought about it and decided to give up the idea of strolling through the war god's kingdom. Afterward, Tang turned his gaze to the sky of the never-ending theater. There, the curtain covering the sky became transparent and insubstantial in front of Tang, who had already become Sequence 1. His sight pierced through countless obstacles, seeing the astral world, seeing the invisible barrier, and also seeing the terrifying faces one after another outside the barrier, as well as the various desires to drill into the barrier. Astral wandering. Olsen and Angie's advancement ceremonies also need to be prepared. Find an opportunity to go to the starry sky and take a look. Fifth Epoch, late December of 513. To welcome the new year, the university schedules final exams for 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the teaching progress of each subordinate college, during the last 2 weeks of each year. Students at Tingen University bustled between various distinctive buildings, occasionally hearing students muttering curses at those who had donated pounds and expanded the school over the years. Why did you build the school so big? School, can't you be a little considerate? Running from the east side to the west side to take exams with only 20 minutes in between. Are we supposed to run ourselves to death on 2 legs? Within Tingen University, there were not only young men and women from all over Ruin who came through various exams or by reputation, but also miserable students from Miskatonic University whose language skills were lacking. Celia, the hunter, Archer, the assassin, and Regulus, the warrior, were similarly busy rushing between the various off-white buildings of Tingen University. Like the miserable students entering exam week, after the ancient Hermes language proficiency test in the morning, they still had to take the giant language proficiency test in the afternoon, and the next day, they would continue to take corresponding tests in giant language and dragon language. Don't even mention it, their heads were filled with all sorts of messy words, grammar, and articles. Many students from Miskatonic University, whether they had become Beyonders or not, felt like, this is all there is to life. 3 months of high-intensity language training had nearly overwhelmed these individuals, even those who had become Beyonders and had their energy and endurance enhanced by potions, let alone those who had not yet become Beyonders. Proficiency in languages capable of leveraging the power of nature was a fundamental requirement for a Beyonder, and yet, facing such high-intensity study assignments, not a single person wanted to leave, which was perplexing. There's food to eat, a place to live, medical treatment when you're sick, and professional psychoanalyst to help with mental issues. Even if your family's circumstances are difficult, you can immediately get enough money to cover expenses, even helping your relatives, by signing a loan agreement. How could anyone give up on such a place? Moreover, as long as they could graduate from Miskatonic University, they could bring their families to Tingnan City, be allocated housing and stable jobs. Such promises, in a world where not having enough to eat or wear was the norm, were almost miraculous, like a vortex. Once seen, once touched, once felt, it was impossible not to be moved. Because of the unbelievable beauty, because they understood the power of the university itself, they would inevitably persevere, no matter how hard it was. After finishing the last language test of the day, the group, feeling their heads throbbing, first solved the dinner problem in the Tingnan University cafeteria and randomly found a door near the cafeteria. They stood in front of the door, confirming that there were no students around. Celia, at the front, infused spirituality into the tag hanging on her wrist, emitting a hazy light. Then, this hunter gently pushed the door inward. It feels incredible no matter how many times we do this. She looked at the scene inside the door and returned with her 2 companions to Miskatonic University, which was equally magnificent but seemed a little quieter and less lively than Tingnan City. It was as unbelievable as everyone not understanding why a school that clearly had mystical significance would cooperate with Tingnan City in the Kingdom of Ruin, or with Tingnan University. Celia waved, signaling to her roommate Alice, who had returned earlier than them, that they were back too. "Hi, Alice, how did your exam go?" Regulus, the warrior, scratched his head and muttered softly, "Can we not talk about this right now?" The ancient Hermes language in his head was already fighting with the giant language. "What are your plans for the evening? Going to the library? Or just going back to the dormitory to rest?" Seeing that the somewhat silent girl had noticed them and walked over, Celia asked her companion with a smile. "I plan to go back and rest for a while, and also review on my own. I applied to stay on campus during the holiday. What are your plans?" The Miskatonic University holiday was the same as Khoi and Tingnan's holiday, starting on the last day of the old year and ending on the 3rd Monday of January. Depending on the college and exam cycle, the duration of the holiday varied among the colleges. At that time, Miskatonic University students could travel between the various countries of the North and South continents via the Spirit World Express they had used to get there, and they could use the ticket given by the school when they left to get back on the train for the next semester. It could be said to be quite humane. Of course, to take care of some students whose families had broken up or whose relatives had all passed away, staying on campus during this holiday period was not a problem. The school's cafeteria and dormitory would also be open as usual. Sometimes, for some people, staying at school was a better choice than returning to their families. Archer, who had fled from home, was clearly the latter. He wanted to change himself, and returning to his hometown, facing his father, he couldn't just be a Sequence 9, only proficient in languages. "I plan to go home," Celia said. "I received a letter from my mother before. She's very worried about me. I definitely have to go back." "I probably have to go back too," Regulus said in a muffled voice. "The fields at home haven't been taken care of yet. Counting the days, the calf is about to be born, and the family can't handle it. Going home to plant vegetables and then deliver a calf." Celia and Archer both looked at Regulus, finding this answer both unexpected and reasonable. "My home is in Tingnan. I don't need to go back," Alice said lightly. This seer's voice was ethereal, as if she didn't exist in this world. Archer was a little curious. "Miss Alice, has your family always been local to Tinghan City?" Yes, Alice didn't think there was anything to hide, but after answering this question, she stopped talking. Archer didn't mean to press further. This person, who always seemed to have no presence but seemed to know a lot about Tinghan City and the Beyonders of Miskatonic University, always felt like she was hiding some secrets. After another 2 days and a lot of hard work fighting with various well-known and unknown languages, the Fifth Epoch of 513 was about to come to an end. The Spirit World Express had already taken many students back to their hometowns. These 3 months, whether at Miskatonic University or Tinghan University, had been exceptionally peaceful, days of tranquility that many people had hardly experienced in the past 10 or 20 years of their lives. As for the remaining people who didn't choose to go home, on the last day of the old year, the gentleman who gave the opening speech gathered them once again in the auditorium. Archer was also among the many students. Frankly, more people chose not to go home than he had imagined. Alice gazed at the man on the stage, wearing a black top hat and a matching tailcoat. A faint flicker seemed to dance in her hollow eyes, but she couldn't quite make it out. Changed. While Mr. Nicholas Flamel was slowly reciting prayers on the stage for the departure of the old year and the arrival of the new, and announcing that there would be some celebrations on campus, Archer heard Alice's murmur beside him. Changed. Alice stared unblinkingly at Nicholas Flamel, who was no longer wearing his monocle, and remained silent. Just as Archer turned his head again, assuming she wouldn't speak, he heard Alice's ethereal, weightless voice, as befitting a seer, confirming his suspicion. His state, wait, his. In ruin, the pronunciations for he, referring to a man, and he, referring to a deity, are distinctly different. As she spoke, within the depths of Alice's pupils, strange, transparent worms with 12 segments emerged. This seer had glimpsed something incomprehensible, something indescribable. Archer was still pondering what Alice meant, what she meant by his state has changed, and why she used he as a pronoun, when he, who had not yet deeply delved into the world of mysticism, suddenly noticed a bizarre change in Alice. He saw something bulging and wriggling on the face of the seemingly ethereal, almost non-existent girl. Alice was blank, but seemed to notice Archer's gaze and looked towards him. In that instant, Archer saw countless tiny, transparent worms spewing out of Alice's eyes. These worms crawled out of her eyes, mouth, nose, ears, and pores. She didn't seem like a living person, but like a monster whose core had long been hollowed out by worms. Archer never imagined he would see something like this at school. What happened to her? What happened to her body? Archer's mind, which had been somewhat blank due to the holiday and the end of exams, was now filled with terror. His legs trembled uncontrollably, and he fell backward, his voice shaking. Having never seen such a scene, his eyes were filled with fear of the unknown and a nauseated feeling that arose involuntarily in the face of this scene. What's wrong? What? Alice, whose face and body were covered with transparent worms erupting from every pore, opened her mouth, and her mouth was also filled with those bizarre, terrifying worms writhing. Worms, worms. Archer desperately wanted to use his voice to attract the attention of Mr. Nicholas Flamel, who was giving a summary on the stage, and to attract the attention of the surrounding students, but at this moment, it seemed as if there was a clear, insurmountable chasm between them and the surroundings. They were clearly in the crowd, yet outside of it, not belonging to the same space. Alice seemed to realize her abnormality at this moment. She reached out her hand and touched her face, but saw countless tiny, transparent worms with 12 segments constantly pouring out of every pore and every inch of skin on her palm and arm. She froze in place, her eyes widening suddenly. Then, her eyeballs also shriveled, as if the things filling her eyeballs had also turned into countless worms, crawling out from within. Alice could no longer see the surrounding things. She vaguely recalled the words of that gentleman, the one who knew her ancestor. And now, the same words echoed in her and Archer's ears. Don't listen to what you shouldn't hear, don't look at what you shouldn't see. A young man walked over from the side. The newcomer had short black hair and a somewhat soft, not very stern, thin face. In the supposedly cold winter, the young man was only wearing a gray fleece knit jacket, paired with off-white trousers like casual homeware, but it also made his complexion, which was already pale from not being exposed to the sun for years, appear even colder. A calm voice rang in Archer and Alice's ears, calm, peaceful, and exceptionally young. Archer had never seen this young man, but he saw the young man look at him and ask a strange question with a smile. "What is your New Year's wish? New Year's wish?" Facing such a person, still constantly crawling with worms, "You ask me what my New Year's wish is?" Archer was stunned there, but Tang clicked his tongue and focused his gaze on Alice, who was on the verge of losing control because she had directly looked at Nicholas Flamel, an Angel King who was infinitely close to Sequence 0, and used the Seer's ability to suffer a backlash. Seer, huh? Like the Hanged Man's listener, they are both beyonders of low sequence who are extremely prone to losing control. Archer had obviously realized what the strange young man in front of him meant. He instantly thought of some legends, such as magicians walking in the world who could help others fulfill their wishes. Thinking of this, the assassin pathway Beyander quickly said, I hope Miss Alice can return to normal." "Okay." Tang nodded, and before Archer could say, "What reward do you want me to pay?" he snapped his fingers. "Your New Year's wish will be fulfilled." The next moment, in Archer's astonished and stunned gaze, those transparent worms with 12 segments crawled back, through Alice's already disappeared eye sockets, nostrils, mouth, and pores all over her body, and into her body. Where Archer couldn't see, these constantly wriggling time worms turned back into Alice's flesh and blood, returning to a stable state. Alice's eyeballs were refilled with countless transparent worms. When she realized what had happened, her head was already dizzy, and she fainted straight down. Nicholas should have warned her. Sure enough, teaching people doesn't work, but one lesson from experience is enough. Tang shook his head. "See, isn't this a typical case?" He looked again at Archer, who was obviously stunned, and the corners of his mouth twitched, revealing a somewhat strange expression. "Assassin, huh? After the next school year starts, I should tell these children a sentence. Potions cannot be drunk randomly, especially assassin and hunter potions." A festive red adorned the vast campus, and the sky, as if to enhance the scene, began to release snowflakes that were white as snow, yet not overly cold. As the students who hadn't left campus emerged from the grand auditorium, the snow, which had been falling for quite some time, had already covered the ground in a thick layer, concealing the bricks and the various plants growing on the lawn. For the people of the northern and southern continents, icy snowflakes and cold winters were words associated with death and endings. Although the southern continent still maintained the tradition of worshipping the god of death, not everyone was fearless in the face of death. Each time the icy snowflakes and cold winter arrived, it symbolized the god of death wielding his sharp scythe, reaping the lives of ordinary, unremarkable people. Every year, winter symbolizes the death of countless people, but today, as the snowflakes fell from the sky, even more lantern-like objects floated up from all over the school. The countless red lanterns illuminated the already bright sky, their very existence seeming to dispel the haze and the fear of the unknown and the future in countless hearts, causing people to focus their minds on the countless illuminated, exquisitely crafted lanterns. In the distant reaches of the sky, the fiery sun gradually set, and the crimson moon rose, but the sky did not gradually dim as the sun set, nor was it ruled by darkness and crimson. The lanterns rose higher and higher, but the area they illuminated did not become smaller and smaller. The countless brilliant objects were like stars adorning the night, but even more dazzling and radiant than stars. They rose higher and higher, yet they became brighter and brighter. They gradually lit up the entire night sky, making the crimson moon appear bleak. They were like the hope in everyone's hearts, flying to the highest point in the limitless sky, blooming there. "Get him to the hospital, and notify his family." Acher heard the voice of a young man behind him talking to the arriving medical staff in white coats. He turned his head slightly and saw the medical staff in white coats stepping forward, preparing to take away his unconscious companion. Acher subconsciously followed, hurrying after the medical staff towards the hospital. After all, he knew the person, and it wouldn't be right to just leave him there. Acher curiously, and somewhat fearfully, looked back at the seemingly powerful young man. He noticed that the other person seemed to be looking at him as well, with some strange emotion in his eyes. Acher was stunned, But he couldn't decipher what that strange emotion in the other person's eyes was, and followed the medical staff to the nearby hospital. What emotion? Naturally, it's sympathy, pity, plus a little bit of schadenfreude. Alas, Tang, you're already a Sequence 1 mystical faceless. You can't let your expression of watching a show. As a Sequence 1 clown and faceless, Tang was quite confident in his ability to control his expression. Tang watched the medical staff and Acher, the poor unlucky guy who didn't know that the sequel to The Assassin was a disaster, leave, then raised his head and looked at the calming lanterns rising into the sky, nodding in satisfaction. However, the calming lanterns should have been released on the 15th. Forget it, never mind. Should I have dumplings with coconut juice for dinner? Ah, it's so good to have the abilities of an ancient scholar. Nicholas walked out of the auditorium at some point. This angel of the king, who had successfully become a 2+1 thief, took off the top hat he was wearing and also looked up slightly at the sky illuminated by the lanterns, smiling and saying, "Mr. Olsen Abraham has arrived." Okay. Tang nodded, then very naturally reached out to the angel of the king. Nicholas withdrew his gaze and looked sideways at Tang's outstretched hand in confusion. "Happy New Year," Tang asked with a smile. "Just consider it an early New Year's greeting. Won't you give me a red envelope, Lord Flammel?" Nicholas was stunned, then a smile appeared on his face as well. Who asks their secret puppet for a red envelope? It's as if I'm your elder, however, since you've said so. All right. Nicholas seemed to have been prepared for this, and his right hand seemed to grab something from the void. He handed Tang an object wrapped in a red envelope. "Happy New Year." Tang took the item for granted, feeling the thickness of the red envelope, knowing that there should be a lot of gold pound notes inside. Although money was useless to him at this level, it was indeed nice to receive a red envelope. Tang walked into the snowy night, the clothes of the students walking out already covered with a layer of snowflakes, and walked towards the distance. Olsen seemed to have been waiting in the snow for a while. He still looked young, but his temperament had an old-fashionedness that exceeded his apparent age. After seeing Tang, he also showed a sincere smile. "Happy New Year." "Happy New Year, Olsen. I've sent all the kids back. Phew, that should keep things quiet for a while." Olsen sighed, and also looked at the calming lanterns rising into the sky, a relaxed smile on his face. As a demigod of the apprentice pathway, it was better to have a demigod-level extraordinary person sitting in the spirit world steam train. After all, not long ago, the major churches and secret organizations had already paid attention to Miskatonic University, paying attention to the disappearance of extraordinary individuals from their forces out of thin air. Sending these students back at this time was somewhat risky, and it was necessary to kick off those who were trying to hitch a ride. And many of the high-ranking members of the apprentice pathway are members of Abraham. "Want to have a drink tonight? You and Owen go drink, I'll pass." Compared to alcohol, he still preferred carbonated drinks like cola. Tang looked around, then reached out and grafted this space with a scene inside the theater. As a Sequence 4 Arcanist, Olsen had just raised his leg when he noticed the changes in the surrounding space. This was not the result of the Evernight Theater cooperating on its own. Olsen opened his mouth slightly, staring at Tang with wide eyes, his eyes full of, "Ah no, what sequence are you now? Aren't you only Sequence 3? Does the ancient scholar already have the extraordinary ability to use space?" "Ah, that's the secret. Isn't it because I'm afraid of scaring you to death if I say it?" Tang made a silent gesture, then took a slight step forward. Olsen followed Tang's spiritual guidance and made the same movement. The two of them changed from the world of white snow to a mountain villa with a warm fireplace and a quiet forest outside the window. Here, Olsen saw Owen Lamdre, the Tinan city governor of 300 years ago. Compared to the old man who was slightly hunched over due to his old age, and whose body was no longer as strong and resilient as before, the extraordinary being in front of him, already of a high sequence, was still in his prime, looking as radiant as ever, without any traces of time's erosion. "You've arrived?" Owen noticed someone's arrival, raised his head, and saw Tang and Olsen. This high-ranking figure of the death pathway also revealed a smile, put down the weapon he was maintaining, and stood up. After a brief exchange of greetings, Tang asked, "Where's father?" He should be back soon, Owen replied. As he spoke, the doors slowly opened a crack, and Azik Eggers, of medium build, with gentle features and a bronze complexion, walked into the seemingly warm room covered in ice and snow, as if he had just returned from the snowy outside. Upon seeing Owen, Tang, and Olsen, this Death Governor also revealed a gentle smile. Tang turned to the side, and through the ability of an ancient scholar, using the authority of a mysterious servant and the power of Euclidean space, he pulled the historical void image originating from the distant past, from the old era. A table suddenly appeared out of thin air in the somewhat empty room. On the table were exquisitely arranged various vegetables and fruits, strangely packaged snacks, and many strange liquids in transparent plastic bottles, steaming dishes and rice, and many other things full of color, aroma, and taste, appearing in the real world as Tang pulled. "Happy New Year, Father, Owen. Congratulations and may you be prosperous, give me red envelopes." Azik Eggers seemed to have prepared in advance, taking out the things he had prepared from his pocket, and even Olsen, who had come to celebrate the New Year together, received a red envelope. The newest and most complete novels are first published at %%%. As for why use red envelopes, why everyone is obviously not a child anymore and still giving gifts. Mr. Azik Eggers said, he doesn't understand, but he respects it. Although everyone is not a child anymore, they are not that old either, so give it, give it. Outside the window, the midnight bell rang, and above the school in the distant wilderness, countless fireworks bloomed. With the meal almost finished, Owen pulled Olsen and they didn't know how much wine they had drunk. The two high-sequence extraordinary beings now seemed muddle-headed, sitting on the ground, leaning against the sofa, and started talking nonsense, completely unaware of politeness and the cultivation of a high sequence. Ah, truly inelegant. Tang gracefully held a goblet, gently sipping the liquid inside. He sighed silently. As expected, 82-year Sprite still suited his taste. In his pocket, a ring was wrapped in a festive red envelope, lying quietly inside. Host, Happy New Year. The system was also setting off fireworks in Tang's mind. Happy New Year, system, Tang said softly to his system, looking at Azik Eggers, who was sitting on the sofa, gazing at the fireworks outside the window and somewhat lost in thought. This was another new year for him in this world. Fifth Epoch, 514, early January. There were indeed many more hangers-on the Spirit World Express this time. This time, those who tried to cling to the steam train were not treated as gently as those people last time. With high-sequence extraordinary beings stationed, coupled with the fact that this train itself was a large mystical creation, when facing extraordinary beings below the angel level trying to track it, most of them could only be thrown off. And the remaining small number who sneaked into the train, either boarding with those who had tickets or as parasites, parasitizing students. These people were either thrown out, or unconsciously showed a smile in the student's body, and were picked out in a state as if they were just about to put on a monocle. These people were tied up and thrown out of the train, and after unprotected travel through the spirit world, they all looked quite embarrassed when they arrived at the final destination, Khoi University. Those responsible for picking up and dropping off the students this time were not only high-sequence extraordinary beings of the apprentice pathway, but also Nicholas Flamel, a high-sequence avatar of the King of Angels. This kind of arrangement easily scared away those who tried to board the train, but had enough knowledge, whether it was spiritual premonition or divination, could reach the point of divining the state of Nicholas's avatar. Nicholas's avatar did not deliberately conceal its existence, and this in itself was a kind of invisible deterrence. After all, no one wanted to unknowingly put on a monocle themselves. As for those official or certain Foss's extraordinary beings who wondered why their own angel didn't board the train together, you should pray for your own good. Those angels who had to give up this plan had already begun to worry that when their church organization's extraordinary beings returned, they would silently take out a monocle and put it on at some point. Although Nicholas Flamel, this King of Angels, was no longer prepared to take out a monocle at ordinary times, the outside world did not know about this. At the same time, Amon, who had already been defeated and had fallen to Sequence 2 himself, also boarded this train at this time. He obviously had an unprecedented interest in this train and its final destination, but he was soon discovered by Nicholas's avatar and purged. Nicholas was deliberately waiting for Amon to come to his door. What a pity, Amon said regretfully. It was unclear whether he was regretting that he had been discovered before he could do anything, or regretting something else. Nicholas smiled at Amon's avatar, and then mercilessly ate this former King of Angels avatar. When the Spirit World Express entered the station, one student after another from the North and South continent walked to the platform. Tang walked to those extraordinary beings who were hung on the train and were now being forked down from the top of the train by staff with equipment, and said to Nicholas beside him, "You had your fun beating them up." As an angel with authority in the field of observation, Tang naturally couldn't fail to see whether these people really wanted to cling to the train and sneak in, or were openly using bait to fish. Okay, although it's a bit upside down, the result still looks acceptable, regardless of the process. When looking at the people walking down from the last carriage, Nicholas Flamel slightly pressed down the black top hat on his head and walked forward before Tang. These were not students from the North and South continent, nor were they extraordinary beings who had boarded the Spirit World Express without permission. They were members of the Church of the Night Goddess. Unlike the Beyonders being hauled off the steam train by station staff, the Beyonders from the Night Church boarded with legitimate tickets, not as stowaways. That's rough. The Night Church had a total of 17 Beyonders, mostly concentrated in the middle to lower sequences. The leader was a Sequence 4 watchman, a high-ranking member of the Night Church. Those being pulled off, looking somewhat disheveled, whether from other Orthodox churches, hidden organizations, or simply wild Beyonders planning something big, looked at the Night Watchers in their uniform, appearing much more respectable, with a mix of odd expressions and resentment, cursing under their breath. The Night Watchers of the Night Church glanced over and then averted their eyes. Some watchers even recognized Beyonders from the Storm Church and the Artisan Church, who happened to be on the list of those being removed. Google search TWKAN, Chinese is dead. Tang saw Nikolaus discussing matters with the Sequence 4 demigod, his figure gradually fading, rejoining with a certain space in the distance. That demigod from the Night Church possessed the Beyonder characteristics of Chinese. The Night Church developed rapidly in the early Fifth Epoch, relying on the Night Watcher system, summarized and developed by Archbishop Chinese 300 years prior, which was then applied throughout the entire kingdom of Loen. The number of supernatural events and cultist uprisings in areas where the Night Church was present significantly decreased. And that watchman who promoted the Night Watcher system throughout the country, thus reducing many unnecessary sacrifices and protecting many citizens, sacrificed himself in a battle against cultists 300 years ago, his soul returning to the goddess's kingdom. He was indeed a Beyonder worthy of praise. Time continued to move forward slowly. All lives, their little bits of memories, were small but important fragments in the mist of history. What he left behind was not only the advancement of the entire kingdom of Loen towards a better future, but also an indelible spiritual wealth within the Night Church. Tang sighed and then turned his gaze in a certain direction. It was a port within the Phenopot kingdom. In the Fourth Epoch, Amon and Bethel Abraham sealed something from outer space there. He rested his cheek on his palm, pondered for a moment, and then took something out of the system space. It was the item left behind in Euclidean space by Bethel Abraham, who had been pulled out by Amon when dealing with Amon when he was sealed again. It was a severed hand of Bethel Abraham. This severed hand originating from Mr. Door, its severed part no longer had crimson-black liquid seeping out. Overall, it appeared pale, without vitality or spirituality, looking no different from the severed hands and feet of ordinary corpses. But this was only the superficial state. Even without any remaining Beyonder characteristics, using this severed hand can open all doors that do not possess extraordinary abilities and most doors that possess sealing effects and supernatural power. Similarly, under the full moon, this severed hand will emit incomprehensible, undecipherable sounds. Although it is unclear how a severed hand can sing, everyone who hears this sound will involuntarily worship the moon and yearn for the grace of the Great Mother. This is equivalent to a gift, containing the remnants of Bethel Abraham and the corrupted spirituality of the fallen mother. And as the king of angels of the door pathway, this flesh and blood remnant that has not severed its mystical connection still has powerful mystical effects. Under the effect of the bug, to some extent, This thing can be symbolically equated with Mr. Door himself and can be used as credentials to enter certain specific areas. Ammon and Bethel Abraham, these great nobles of the Solomon Empire in the Fourth Epoch, jointly sealed something. Something that both kings of angels could not solve, something that could lead to a very serious disaster. What could it be? Tang lowered his eyes, pondered carefully, and prepared to find time to see what the situation was like there. As a mature and far-sighted diviner, Tang felt that there might be good things there. Phenapot Kingdom. I remember that it is still a country jointly ruled by the God of Knowledge and Wisdom and the Church of the Earth Mother. In the original plot, it was during the Oath-Breaking War more than 700 years into the Fifth Epoch that the churches of these two gods had serious differences, which led to the phenomenon that countries like Lemberg worshipped the God of Knowledge and Wisdom, while only the Church of the Earth Mother existed within the Phenapot Kingdom. With both Orthodox churches possessing good strength, and it being a big trouble that even Ammon and Bethel Abraham could not solve. Interesting. The Night Watchers of the Night Church carried their suitcases, looking somewhat restrained as they looked at the Time Worm avatar of Nikolaus, sitting opposite them, wearing a black top hat and a matching tailcoat suit. This Thief Pathway Time Worm avatar was gazing at the scenery outside the carriage. The sunlight outside the window was very warm, and it was a good day, making people feel unconsciously happy. This caused him to always have a faint smile on his lips, which made people shudder involuntarily when they saw it. The carriage was silent, and no one tried to start a conversation. Apart from the occasional sound of this Sequence 1 King of Angels, or rather, the Sequence 1 Angel's avatar, adjusting the monocle in his right eye socket, there seemed to be no other sound in the carriage besides breathing. Sitting in this carriage was the Night Watcher's high-ranking deacon, York Zachariah, the Sequence 4 Watchman of the Night Pathway, who had inherited the legacy of his predecessors in the church, a true demigod. As for the rest, they were Sequence 5 and Sequence 6 Beyonders of the middle sequence within the church, the backbone of the church, and the personnel who really needed to receive standardized, systematic training at Miskatonic University this time. But facing such a high Sequence Beyonder wearing a monocle, with a smile on his lips, looking out the window in a good mood, and appearing to be quite good-tempered and without airs, even the Night Church's high-ranking deacon, the true demigod York Zachariah, did not have much desire to speak. There was no other reason. This situation was like the myths and legends they usually heard suddenly entering reality, like watching a horror story. There were many descriptions of ancient secrets within the church, including the narration of the ancient sun god who ended the madness and chaos of the ancient god's rule in the Third Epoch, and his children. Before boarding the Spirit World Express, a steam train specially docked at the Black Knight Church headquarters, located at the Tranquility Church in Winter County, the chosen leaders of each team heading to Miskatonic University for exchange studies, the deacons, and the potential extraordinary individuals from major cities were already aware of the current situation in Tinan City and the connection between Miskatonic University and the Black Knight Church. Also, there was Nicholas Valerian, who first appeared in Tinan City 300 years ago during the major reform period, in the state of Sequence 1 of the Thief Pathway. This is an angel walking on the earth, a true king of angels, a powerful being living in murals and church scriptures. He replaced the child of the ancient sun god, the god of deception named Ammon, becoming the first echelon under the gods, a truly living myth. Manipulating the pointers of time, wandering in the shadows of fate, the embodiment of deceit and mischief. Each object corresponding to the ancient Hermes language in this description of the honorific title was stripped away from the former king of angels, the son of the ancient sun god, creating the Fifth Epoch, the angel king of the Thief Pathway who is now cooperating with the Black Knight Church, the new apex power of this pathway. No one dared to disrespect such an existence, it was real, even a clone could easily crush them to death. Do not gaze upon a god. Even Sequence 4 or Sequence 3 demigods were no exception. Nicholas's clone glanced at the Night Watchers sitting upright across from him, but did nothing to them. At this time, other Time Worm clones were dealing with the parasitic beings who had sneaked aboard, and these parasitic beings happened to be either descendants of Zoroaster or descendants of the Jacob family. All were famous, big shots, who, once caught, would shout injustice and report an unexpected but reasonable name. The newest and most complete novels are first published. Mr. Pal's Zoroaster sent us here. It was my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather. Cough cough, in short, my grandfather sent me here. You can't kick me off, you can't throw me down. This group of demigods, when facing their direct superior, were surprisingly confident and assertive. The smile on the corner of Nicholas Valerian's mouth, who was not wearing a monocle, grew larger and larger as he looked at this group of parasitic beings and deceiving mentors, his smile unchanged. The rogues and hooligans of the high sequence of the thief pathway, who were not confident and assertive, gradually became more and more guilty. They slowly moved their steps. Oh no, this guy wouldn't want to eat them too, would he? Nicholas seemed to understand their thoughts, and took out a monocle from somewhere, pretending to put it in the eye socket of his right eye. How about, you guess? If you guess right, I won't eat you. Okay, the demigods from those big families of the thief pathway, are they all sent to me? As a mystical servitor, and now the entire Miskatonic University is within his observation range, Tang naturally saw such a scene. He didn't know how to evaluate the old man's actions, but the other party's concerns were obviously taken into account. With a slight smile, Tang entered the Euclidean space and conducted a wide-ranging observation of the entire world. Grandpa Pals did not return to Miskatonic University. This sequence 1 angel was also traveling around the world for Amon this time, but not to confront or weaken him as before, but to kill, eliminate, and recover. Amon still has several Sequence 2 Fate Steed clones. If he determines that he cannot return to Sequence 1 and even loses the uniqueness of this pathway, his greatest possibility is to collect various extraordinary characteristics of the low sequence in the thief pathway and cause a qualitative change to some extent through quantitative change. Amon was once the king of angels of the thief pathway, so it is not difficult to suspect that, having once possessed this position, he may still have some way to use a large number of extraordinary characteristics of the thief pathway to open up a new path. Why not study in the starry sky, really? Tang swept around the eastern, southern, and northern continents. Apart from some unimportant or inherently special Amon clones, the other Amons could no longer be found. They disappeared without a trace, as if they had never appeared, and even the guys who parasitized those extraordinary individuals were almost all done by other parasites, not Amon. After expanding the observation range of the Euclidean space to the astral world where the gods are located, Tang naturally knew that Amon had not left this planet. So, where can he hunt enough thief, apprentice, and seer extraordinary characteristics with high enough positions? The Jacob and Zoroaster families have a certain connection. The Destiny Hermit Society was originally an organization established to fight against Amon. After Pal's Zoroaster, the ancestor of the Zoroaster family, had a clear place to defend against Amon's invasion, it was a wise decision to send other members of the Destiny Hermit Society, high-sequence extraordinary individuals of the thief pathway, over. As for the door pathway, if Amon intends to confront Mr. Door and the Fallen Mother head-on, then becoming a new carrier of the Fallen Mother's power is the best ending. He wouldn't be so stupid to do that. The Abraham family and high-ranking apprentices are not many either. Most of them appear in the form of sealed artifacts and are in the hands of major churches and secret organizations. As for the seer, whether it is the Secret Order or Antigonus, they are all under Tang's control. Now, unless Amon can ascend to the Source Castle at this time and obtain the last extraordinary characteristic of the mystical servitor, he can only find a way to jump to other pathways. In fact, now is the best time to kill Amon and his clones all at once. As long as Adam doesn't take action, Amon will only have a dead end under the double attack of the mystical servitor and the Time Worm Angel King. And even the possibility of resurrection will be cut off. After all, Nicholas is now stronger at playing with errors and loopholes. Nicholas glanced at these cowardly parasites who were about to huddle together and cry about their unreliable ancestors, and after stuffing the monocle grabbed from the void into his pocket, he said, "Go to the 3rd floor of the bishop's building and register with Brooks." After looking at these thief demigods who seemed to have been fooled by their ancestors, Nicholas shook his head, feeling that apart from him, the thief pathway was really a distinct pathway. Sequence 9 to Sequence 5, Ordinary and Useless Thieves. Sequence 4 to Sequence 1, Amon and some seemingly not-so-smart food, and an old man who has been living to the present with everything he needs. Chapter 220,219. He looked like he was about to shatter. The new year began, and after escaping the difficult and cruel linguistics hell, more than 1,000 men and women who had traveled from all over the North and South continents received their unique identification on the second day of school. It was a small, exquisite, rectangular object, about half the size of a palm, encased in transparent glass. The front of this rectangular object was printed with the crest of Miskatonic University, which was an open book, ears of wheat, flowers, stars, curves and planes, and various complex and meaningful esoteric symbols. The back was engraved with some information about the owner of the card. This is an identity card deeply bound to your spirituality and soul. Before you die, this item cannot be traded, bought, sold, exchanged, or used through general mystical means. After you die, or if you are in a situation where you cannot control yourself for some special reason, the identity card will also be ineffective. With this, you can use this identification to open a door to Miskatonic University on any door or anything with the concept of door in Tinan City. Similarly, you can use this proof to enjoy discounts on medical care and transactions. Some people with less affluent family conditions can receive some money each month as a subsidy, which can serve as a mobile savings card, without the need to carry around recent mystical version of ID card, a meal card that can swipe for money. Taiwanese novel website right-pointing arrow TWKAN.com. Archer looked at the things written on the back of his ID card. Name: Archer Lancaster. Assassin Pathway Sequence 9, Assassin Note, cannot be observed infused with spirituality by others. Mentally reciting, close, will close this effect. Very brief. Besides the name, only information about his pathway remained. However, what does cannot be observed by others mean? Archer curiously glanced at his companions. Their IDs only showed the name column. Besides that, Archer couldn't see their specific sequence name or pathway. Just like the note said, it couldn't be observed. It's a bit like the extraordinary ability of the spectator pathway. Celia, who had good mystical knowledge, also looked at Alice's ID card, who seemed to be much more silent. Obviously, she didn't see other information on the other party's ID card either. Spectator pathway. Archer only knew that there were 22 god pathways, but he didn't know much about this basic mystical knowledge. Sequence 9, Spectator, has excellent observation skills. Sequence 8, Mind Reader. An extraordinary people of the spectator pathway seem to have an extraordinary ability to influence other people's senses after reaching the middle sequence. If they want you to see it, you can see it. If they don't want you to see it, you can't see it. Celia Tell the Story proudly said, "I did a good job of checking these things when I went back this time." She had crammed a lot of information about the god pathways. Awesome. Regulus clapped his hands honestly. Celia was about to continue speaking when strange fluctuations appeared on the back of their ID cards. Bishop Building B, Room B203, please arrive before 1400 this afternoon. It seemed that different words appeared on everyone's ID cards. Will it change? This didn't seem as simple as the hidden information that Celia said. Archer and Regulus both looked at Celia, but Celia was embarrassed for a moment, and then said uncertainly, Maybe it's the extraordinary ability of a high-sequence user of the spectator pathway. Okay. There were quite a few bishop buildings in the school. The few people told each other which bishop building and floor they needed to go to. Only Celia and Archer were in the same bishop building, but not on the same floor. When Archer arrived at room 203, Building B of the Bishop Building written on the back of the ID card, he found that it was also a fairly large lecture hall. It seemed that in order to take care of the Fursak Empire, which was said to have giant bloodlines, most places in Miskatonic University were built extremely tall, which was very convenient for these extraordinary people who were over 1.9 meters tall to move around. At this time, some people were sitting in this tidy and clean classroom, mostly men and fewer women, looking like about 40 or 50 people. Archer glanced around and found that many of them seemed to have the characteristics of an assassin. The school seems to have assigned classrooms according to different pathways. Are the people here all assassins? When the magnificent bells outside the window rang, Archer had already taken his seat, and even at this moment when the bells rang, 2/3 of the classroom was still empty. There weren't many people, or rather, not many people chose assassin. Those who had not taken the potion seemed to have been unified together to explain some basic mystical knowledge. Archer couldn't help but feel fortunate at this moment that he had already become an extraordinary and had heard a lot of mystical knowledge from Celia, leading many people in the extraordinary field. When the ringing of the bells ended, a blonde woman walked in from outside the door. That seemed to be their teacher. The blonde woman who walked slowly into the classroom was wearing a soft white gauze dress. Her expression was gentle and full of emotion. It seemed that between every glance and smile, she carried a unique charm that belonged to the essence of women. But when this blonde woman smiled and stood on the podium, looking at the students below, her red lips slightly opened, and her exceptionally delicate voice rang like a silver bell around every gentleman and every lady. Archer felt the abnormality in his body. He looked at the woman on the podium, almost uncontrollably, and couldn't help but swallow. Not to mention the gentlemen present, even those assassins who were also women showed abnormal states under the control of the woman on the podium. "Welcome to the world of witches." This high-ranking witch, who was laughing and talking, slowly uttered such a sentence from her mouth. Her hair stood up root by root in the horrified eyes of the 47 witch apprentices under the stage, like countless spider silks spreading out, blocking the light-collecting windows, making the entire classroom enter a dark, suffocating, and cramped environment. At the top of the countless hairs, one emotionless, black or white, crazy eye after another grew out. Therefore, choosing the witch pathway and the hunter pathway will cause physical changes at sequence 7 and sequence 4. This is the essential change brought about by the potion. If you want to choose these two pathways, please make your own choices carefully. Among the 1,142 students from all over the North and South continents who came to Miskatonic University, about 1/3 of them were not extraordinary individuals themselves, but simply lucky, or had come into contact with information about the occult. Based on the 22 Paths of Gods, Miskatonic University offers courses such as Basic Occultism, Advanced Occultism, Semiotics, Spell Studies, Ritual Magic, Mineralogy, Monster Studies, Medicine, Appraisal Studies, and Psychology, all conforming to the sequence of paths. At the same time, there are a large number of practical courses, including Monster Response, Survival Skills in specific extreme environments, and Combat Studies. Among the 22 Paths of Gods, adjacent paths are bundled together to form new departments. Each department is further divided into different classes based on different sequences. Students freely combine the various courses offered by Miskatonic University based on the characteristics of their own paths and the sequence they are in. Outside of these departments, those who have not yet obtained extraordinary abilities before entering the school will receive corresponding extraordinary materials and potion formulas after receiving a certain amount of occult knowledge education, according to their own wishes. Of course, the school will naturally not give these things away for free. By spending a certain amount of money, or by signing a contract to repay in the future, you can get the corresponding items from the school. In principle, the school does not restrict their choice of paths, but clearly explains the characteristics of each path, informs them of the advantages and disadvantages, and then gives them the right to choose. For example, the seer pathway of the true creator, the abyss pathway of the dark side of the universe, the prisoner pathway of the bound god, and the witch pathway of the primordial witch are not good choices. As for those who came in as assassins, maybe they can switch paths when they become high sequence. Of course, the school strongly supports those who choose the seer, the thief, and the apprentice pathways. To say nothing else, these three pathways have sufficient potion formulas, abundant extraordinary characteristics, and rich acting principles and various experiences. Moreover, it is a one-stop service from graduation to employment, from enrollment, learning, graduation, to employment. The secret order sincerely invites you to join. The school can give certain points rewards through the homework tasks you complete on weekdays. These points can be used to exchange for some relatively rare and valuable things within the school, such as middle sequence potion formulas, some special mystical items, or the right to use sealed items. A series of various explanations made their hearts flutter. Not only were there potion formulas, magical potions, and bizarre sealed items that could be exchanged, but also one extremely important thing. Can I bring my family? Can I bring my mom and dad over? Yes. The young man standing on the podium responded with a smile. His voice echoed in every corner of the classroom, steady, but with a power that seemed to be able to pry open everyone's heart. When you officially step into the real extraordinary world, then you will find that extraordinary individuals are beings with power beyond ordinary people. However, what this brings to you is not only money, status, honor, power, and strength, but also danger, madness, horror, distortion, and chaos. The bottom layer of this world is not black and white, not light or darkness, but a distorted, chaotic basic tone. When you truly step into the field of extraordinary individuals, madness will accompany you until the end of your life. So, please choose whether to open this door, called madness. Those who leave will have their memories erased, but will retain everything they have learned in the past 3 months. People who push open this door, before you step in, you can never be sure whether what is in front of you is the avenue of stars or an abyss. But at the moment of stepping in, you have no way to turn back. Ting'an City, Khoi University. Since last September, those train-hopping guys who have been receiving training for some time look pretty good, but they look like they have no interest in living. These official, secret organizations or wild extraordinary individuals saw an unexpected person today. That was Nicolas Flamel, Sequence 1, the Worm of Time. Today is over. This Sequence 1, now the King of Angels, said so. Hearing his words, everyone was excited, and suddenly had a feeling of tears in their eyes. Wolf Conches, this favored of storms from the Storm Church, already had the desire to cry. He did it. He really did it. Lord, yesterday was the first time he scored as high as 70 points. Passed. Ha ha ha. It's 70 points, passed. Could it be that after he passed, the Lord finally favored him and allowed him to escape from the sea of suffering? However, it is not. Although it is a pity, Mr. Wolf Conches, you seem to be happy too early. This angel, wearing a top hat, wearing a swallowtail coat, with a gentle appearance and no edges, said very gently to Wolf Conches, the believer of storms, who was overflowing with excitement. As far as I know, your ancient Hermes language, giant language, monster studies, ritual studies, and semiotics, and other subjects, seem to have always been hovering on the edge of the passing line, never passed. Wolf Conch's face suddenly froze. Not far away, an extraordinary individual who seemed to be from the Church of the God of Knowledge and Wisdom glanced at this favored of storms. Hey, I saw it. Do you believe that I will beat you if you keep making that expression of, I don't argue with fools every day? Wolf Conches roared in his heart, but his face twisted for a while, but in the end he still showed an expression that was uglier than crying, and said to Nicolas Flamel, the King of Angels. Lord Flamel, you mean? Mr. Conches, although your cultural course level, Nicolas thought about his wording, is an eyesore. Wolf Conches looked like he was about to shatter when he heard this word. But in your daily life, in combat and training, you have a standard that exceeds that of those of the same sequence and the same path. This Sequence 1, the Worm of Time who has become the King of Angels, showed a row of neat teeth and smiled. I think you should be very happy to stay for a while longer and make up for the shortcomings of the cultural courses, right? Wolf Conches, who rose and fell, looked like he was really about to shatter. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.